Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Centerville Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm Pastor Joel. I am the youth and young adult pastor here, and we're just so happy for those that gathered here in person, and also mainly for those of you that are with us watching via Zoom or through our live stream. We've got a great schedule of events happening this afternoon with cooking demos and some great speakers lined up for you. First off, I just want to say thank you to everyone that has put this day together. Our health committee has worked for weeks and months to make sure that this has been put together. So thank you, Carrie, and the rest of the health committee. And also to those that are running our sound and AV. I know that George and his family were here late last night making sure that things were going to run smoothly today. So just thank you so much to everyone who has put in extra time to make sure that this event will run smoothly. As we begin, we're just going to open with a word of prayer. Bow your heads with me. Dear gracious and loving Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for a beautiful day and an opportunity to come together and to talk about health and wellness and good food. And Lord, thank you so much for everyone that's gathered with us today. And I ask a blessing upon the procedures and on the events that happened this afternoon. Lord, thank you for being a great God and for loving us. In your name we pray. Amen. It's my honor today to be able to introduce to you a lot of different speakers that are going to be coming up here for our exciting event. So the first one this morning is Adelaide Durkin. She's going to be presenting us with a devotional thought as we start our proceedings. She's a native of Brazil and has lived in this area around Centerville for the last 13 years and has attended this church here at the Centerville Seventh-day Adventist Church. She has been a nursing educator for the past 20 years and serves as a faculty at Kettering College. She's married to her husband, Rob Durkin, and she has two wonderful sons, Johannes and Tiago. So thank you so much, Adelaide, for being here and for sharing a message with us this afternoon.
May I have the screen down, please?
It's on. The screen is on just up there.
So welcome everyone who is attending this event here and via streaming. And I would like to start this devotional thought with a verse that is written in Galatians 5:22 to 23. And it says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. All of these are wonderful gifts of the Spirit. They help us to have good health. However, I want to focus today on temperance. Words, they change in meaning over time. And I was happily surprised, though, to find out that the word temperance actually has a very holistic meaning in our modern dictionary. It's defined as moderation in action, thought, and feeling. I thought that was quite holistic because sometimes we think about temperance as something that you do. Actually, the definition contemplates thoughts and feelings as well. A habitual moderation, a moderation or abstinence from harmful habits. Not only having moderation in something good, but also staying away from harmful habits. And the Bible supports this notion because King Solomon says, eat a little honey, but not too much. Otherwise, you'll feel sick of your stomach. But I like this other definition that we have here on our screen that says that true temperance teaches that we should dispense or stay away from something that is harmful and use with caution those things that are good. And that's by Ellen White. So what does that mean to me? I'm sure all of us have habits that we want to change. The question is, do I believe that I can change my habits? What does modern science has to say about it? Does modern science support the biblical notion that we can actually achieve temperance? And the answer is yes, from both modern science and also from our biblical perspective. And one of the processes that our brain that is used to describe changes that happen in our brain is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to organize itself. So our brain can actually change, and not only in the structure of the brain, but also in the function of the brain. And these little graphics, they help to illustrate this a little bit. New neurons, new brain cells are formed every day, all the time. And as we engage in actions, feelings, or thoughts, these pathways are formed. And as we repeat those pathways, they become strengthened and they become a habit. And those pathways that are not used, they become weak. So what does have to do with the habits that you're trying to change? You know, there is hope that we can make, by God's grace, new pathways in our brain. Next slide, please. So I have three small suggestions for you. If you're thinking about change, start small. First, start with a SMART goal, a specific goal that is achievable, that you can measure. And then take one step at a time. I'm sure we are all inspired by stories of people that change their health around and have great results, especially in a fairly small amount of time, right, and effort. But the truth is, a lot of the habits don't change. We cannot change them so quickly. It may take time, may take perseverance. So one step at a time, one moment at a time. And another tip is celebrate your victories, even if they're small, with those that are supporting you. And be grateful for the victories that you are achieving. As I wrap up my time with you, I'd like to leave you with another thought. For those of us who believe that we cannot change habits by focusing on ourselves, that we need something beyond ourselves, I would like to encourage you to ask for the power of the Holy Spirit. Our first verse that we shared here, we said that the gift of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, temperance. It's a gift. We can ask for it. And in chapter 11 of Luke, we are encouraged. 11 of Luke, we're encouraged to ask for the Holy Spirit. Just like a father, a good father, a loving father wants to give the Holy Spirit for those that want to give good gifts for those that ask them, God is wanting to give the Holy Spirit to us. And I end with a special Bible promise. God has told us that, fear not, I am your God. They hold your right hand and say to you, fear not, I will help you. So no matter what your struggle is, no matter what your goal is, God is more than happy to help you to make new pathways in your brain. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Adelaide, and the reminder about the pathways in our brain and how God can help us to find new pathways and to find healthy pathways for our lives. Coming up next, we have Food as Medicine by Dr. Lindy Schwartz. And Lindy was at medical school at Loma Linda. She graduated in 1982, did her residency in internal medicine at Loma Linda from 1982 to 1985. And she's involved in training internal medicine residents for more than 3 decades. She's the program director of the internal medicine residency program at Kettering Medical Center. And she's been married to her husband, Brian, for almost 31 years. And I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Lindy Schwartz to the stage for Food as Medicine. Thank you.
Okay, I think the Adventist is the black knot one right here, right? Should be. Yeah. No one's looking at me, right? Oh. Well, good afternoon, everyone who is here, and also especially those that are looking online. I just want to really thank the Health Committee for their vision, their innovation in changing this to a virtual event. I feel very sorry for those who are not here because there's food that's going to be cooking. You guys are going to miss the food if you're watching virtually. But anyway, one of my passions is good food, healthy food. And you are what you eat. People say you are what you eat. It is true that you are what you eat. And so food as medicine has become one of the things that I've been really involved with. I'm not sure if the camera can see if I move around. I also want to say that I've given this lecture quite a lot. It's probably actually about maybe 2.5 hours. This is going to give me a part of it. But I always like to have interaction, have prizes. There are questions and there are answers. When I did this at Amen last weekend on 3ABN, there were no prizes. I couldn't give prizes out. That would probably not be so great. But anyway, so we have questions and prizes. So first of all, it's the black one, right? There, okay. All right. So if you look at the leading causes of death in the population per 100,000 people, if you look at that list of things on the board there, at least a half, and probably 7 of them out of the 10 are related to poor dietary choices. In fact, if you look at this, dietary issues factor more prominently in chronic diseases than anything else does. It is not, for example, blood sugars and so forth. And this next slide shows us here that when you look at the deaths due to non-communicable diseases, by non-communicable we mean cardiovascular disease like stroke and heart attacks, congestive heart failure, and so forth, and also diabetes and even some cancers. When you look at that, 45% of the deaths and probably 80% of disease is related to poor dietary food choices. So it's not our genetics, it's not our ethnicity. And that's really important for people to recognize that I don't want to say a bad word, but I'm going to have to say it, and it is that dietary factors trump, genetics and ethnicity. We have no excuse. So that's really a really important thing. In the Lancet, the Global Burden of Disease investigators every year publishes in the Lancet a series of observations of populations. What they're trying to do is to try to understand what the implications are of diet on chronic disease. In other words, how much does diet really factor into chronic disease? And when they look at that, when this was published last year, the headline was, "What we aren't eating is killing us." What we aren't eating is killing us. And so what is it we're not eating? If you look at number 2 there, it says that dietary risks are responsible for 11 million deaths and 255 million disability-adjusted life years. Cardiovascular disease was the leading form of death, cause of death, followed by cancers and type 2 diabetes mellitus. It's interesting because one time I was listening to 2 ladies speaking to each other in Sam's. And they were talking about diabetes and the fact that, I'm going to get it because after all my mother had it and so-and-so had it. And just looking at them, I wanted to say, you don't have to get it. You really don't have to get that. And so what is it we're not eating? It's whole grains. Is this yes, whole grains, fruit and nuts in moderation, and vegetables and seeds. We're eating, though, too much salt. That's the really important thing. The other thing that was significant is they also look at these countries in terms of death rates. And if you look at the United States, it ranked number 43 behind Rwanda and Nigeria. Why is it that the United States is faring so poorly in terms of death rate? As physicians, we are very good at handing out handing out medications and doing procedures and so forth, but we are not able, for some reason, to teach our patients to reach up and turn off the faucet. And that's the problem. So we keep giving them all these drugs, doing all these procedures. They still go back and do everything, eat what they want, and so forth. And the question is that what we really want to do? So what I'm going to attempt to do, and I recognize that this audience is both virtual and live, are not necessarily all medical people, so we'll break it down and make it as simple as we can. But what I would like to address is consensus views on nutrition and what do Americans actually eat. I want to show us what Americans actually eat. And then we're going to take a deep dive in just two things with a brief mention of cancer. On this talk, I have 2 slides I want to show you about cancer. But we're going to look really at cardiovascular disease and insulin resistance that causes type 2 diabetes. And I have really appreciated this. I was going to throw another slide in here, and I didn't, having to do with these buildings. But what you see here is a skyline. And nutritional studies can be very overwhelming. For example, one day butter is good, the next day butter is bad. One of our favorites, and this really affects a lot of people of faith, and that is coconut oil. Coconut oil is good, and then coconut oil is bad. And then it's good again. And what do you really do with these kinds of oils? So a lot of these things come up, and it can be very overwhelming as we look at nutritional studies. So as I think about nutritional studies, which is a lot of what we're going to be looking at, we look at it in terms of what that particular study adds to the weight of evidence in nutrition science. What does that one study add to the weight? It's like one of these buildings. Some of these buildings are tall, some of them are short. And so what does it add to the weight of the evidence? And that's what we're going to be talking about. I like to look at it in terms of food categories. So the framework will be in food categories, and we have 3 food categories on the board. We have red box foods, yellow box food, and green box foods. I think it probably should be fairly intuitive that when you see red, you need to stop. And when you see green, you need to go. And when you see yellow, probably some caution. Now, when I see a yellow light, though, I don't. What I experience is you better go quick or else. Or else if you have to stop, it means you went fast enough. But what we look at these things. So first of all, the framework has us looking in these 3 boxes. And what I want to say is the majority of Americans prioritize their calories in the yellow box foods and the red box foods. The question is, as you look at these foods and you look at the evidence in medicine, if you look at the red box food, broad consensus is that these foods promote harm. It is hard to find a study in the literature that would suggest that these foods are healthful. If you look at the green box foods, you will see that the broad consensus, much of the evidence, the majority of the evidence, all of the evidence suggests that these foods are remarkably health-promoting foods, and there's no evidence to suggest that this is not the case. Now, why are these in the yellow box foods? Dairy, eggs, poultry, and fish? It's because when you compare this box to this box, it looks pretty good. But the weight of the evidence is not uniform. So there's some studies to suggest there's some help, and others to suggest by equal number that these are harmful foods. So what we're going to look at is, first of all, these red box foods, because what we want to do is how do you get people to begin to prioritize their calories in a healthy fashion? So we're going to kind of deconstruct all of these unhealthy foods first as we go along. And again, what I said was the majority of Americans prioritize their calories in the yellow and the red box foods. So first of all, processed meat. So what is processed meat? Processed meat is any meat that has been cured, fermented, smoked, whatever. It includes all these things right here that people eat every day, cold cuts and so forth, and chicken nuggets. And those are not probably the best things that people can eat. Next, we have the red meat, and this, unfortunately, is not pointing in the correct direction. This should be right here. This now is down here. Mistake, I got to fix that. But anyway, red meat. So red meat is any mammalian muscle meat. You know how you always see these things about pork being a white meat? Scientifically, pork is not a white meat. It has tons of myoglobin. When it's exposed to oxygen, it becomes oxymyoglobin, which is a very carcinogenic substance. So mammalian muscle meat, that's how you look at all these. So it includes all these things, and that's what red meat is. We're going to skip added sugar because sugar is fairly self-explanatory, except to say one thing, because I got a question about this. Sugar includes, unfortunately, honey, and all those things. Agave, it's sugar. Brown sugar is still sugar. When I was young growing up, my parents raised us plant-based, and my mom did not believe in sugar. So she would sweeten the lemonade with brown sugar. She thought that was good. Brown sugar, sweetened lemonade. It was terrible. But anyway. So what we want to look at, though, is something that is one of my passions, and that is, what does it mean, whole grains? So as we look at this section right here, so there's the refined sugars, but which are carbohydrates, but then this other thing. If you look at, for example, a grain, a whole grain, anatomy of a grain, there are 3 parts to it. There's the bran, which has lots of nutrients. There's the germ, again, tons of nutrients, plus phytochemicals. And then there's the endosperm. And the endosperm has some things, but not as much as the bran and the germ. So when the bran and the germ are removed, that's called a refined whole grain, refined grains, okay? So if you look at whole grains, you have this wonderful array of things like millet and barley and corn even, and wild rice, pseudograins. So biologically, these are seeds, but functionally, they are grains. So that's why quinoa and buckwheat got in with the whole grains. So if you look at this then, if you remove the bran and the germ, which the process of refining does, you have a very nutritionally depleted food. It's depleted of all the nutrients, 80%. It loses 80% of the fiber and the nutrients. So this is a very nutritionally deplete food. Now, I'm showing you this picture because I want to ask you something really important. I'll tell you a funny story. So if you look at this picture, it says wheat bread, multigrain 7 grain. How many thinks this is pretty good bread? Would you buy this bread? Okay, I see people saying, yeah, they'd buy this bread, okay? Great. Would anybody not buy this bread? Okay, a lot of people wouldn't buy this bread. And the question I would love to ask, but because we're also virtual, I can't ask. And why wouldn't you? This is a great marketing trick. Don't fall for it. Right here it says, unbleached enriched wheat flour. When you see unbleached enriched, and then you see 7 grain, they've added back these refined 7 grains back to this bread. This is not what it's supposed to be. This is not whole grain bread. The very first word you want to see is whole. Okay, whole. If you see whole, you buy it. If you don't see whole, you don't buy it. Don't eat it. This is a marketing trick, okay? I've seen many people at the grocery store, and they're trying to figure out what to buy. And they'll run to me, just ask me questions, what should I buy? And I'm looking at the thing, I'm trying to read the labels. And read the label, make sure the label says whole, okay? Now, if you look at this right here, carbs, this group, this is the red box foods, this is the green box foods. This red box food, refined carbohydrates, is what gives carbs a bad name. Carbs is a confusing term. I recommend for my residents and everybody I meet, please stop saying carbs. Don't say carbs. I think you should remove carbs from the vocabulary because you cannot rank lentils, some of these grains of it, lentils with Wonder Bread, for example, and fruit with Fruit Loops. Fruit are carbohydrate. Fruit Loops are also carbohydrates, but I'll show you another slide later on. So you can't do this. So what really gives this a bad name is these foods over here. So we want to talk about whole grain foods versus refined carbohydrates, and that's a probably more appropriate way to look at it. So the next thing we're going to look at, we had the refined grains. We look at ultra-processed foods. What are ultra-processed foods? Ultra-processed foods are industrially produced, scientifically engineered, highly palatable to keep you coming back for more. That's what ultra-processed foods are. And so whenever you eat ultra-processed food, you're really harming your body significantly. So let me ask you another question. Those online can also do the same. I want to see the hands of those who have ever eaten an Impossible Burger. Okay. Has anybody ever eaten a Beyond Burger? Okay. Are they delicious or what? Some people are saying they're delicious. Well, Brian and I went to a Cheesecake Factory. By the way, don't go there. The food will kill you in a heartbeat. It is amazing. I have never seen an industry able to add so much bad stuff to food and keep people coming to eat week after week after week eating this stuff. It is so harmful, you can't believe it. Now let me tell you about the Impossible Burger. So the Impossible Burger is a soy protein. Beyond Burger is a pea protein, okay? So listen to this carefully. On October 22, 2019, does that date ring a bell, October 22, the Great Disappointment? An article was published in the JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. That article in JAMA was looking at plant-based meat alternatives and are they healthy? Now, that particular article was really focused on environmental issues, not on health issues. But it said that the plant-based meat alternatives are highly palatable, calorie-dense, ultra-processed food, and they are not whole foods. So I tell people, don't eat the Impossible Burger. Brian and I, we were going to sharing one time, but we went there and had this thing because it was at the Cheesecake Factory, heaven forbid. But anyway, I looked it up as I was eating it. I thought, I will never eat this thing again. It was just really, really bad. So ultra-processed foods are a really significant thing that is really, we shouldn't be eating. Now, this slide I like, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like, maybe it is in there, the next slide. Let me just check that. Yeah, it is. Okay, good. So this group is a group of nutrition scientists. This is the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. The Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. This is a group of nutrition scientists that meet every 5 years to advise the U.S. the U.S. Department of Agriculture what Americans should eat over the next 5 years. And so they met every 5 years, and they haven't changed much. In 2020, much like the other years, they said this: a diet higher in plant-based foods, such as vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and lower in calories and animal-based foods is more health-promoting and is associated with less environmental impact than is the current U.S. diet. Now again, this isn't looking at health, but it's really looking at more looking at the environment. Two things, however, were added this year to this committee. By the way, this was published in April or May of this year. The document is 800 and something pages, and so I update this talk, and so I had to review that, and these two stood out as things that were really significant that were added this time. And we're going to talk about these as we go along. So first of all, the two additions were to consider the role of the gut microbiome in the future guidelines. And that's really significant. We're going to come and we're going to talk about that. The gut microbiome is extraordinarily important. Associated with that is also this: examine the relationship between nutrition and the immune function. Now, the reason that was important was that second statement was based on COVID. And what they found out was that people who were eating plant-based diets, which produce short-chain fatty acids, had a long period of eating plant-based diets where the gut microbiome has changed, is really important in immune function. So I thought that was a really significant thing. So these are two of the focus areas in 2025. When they give us new recommendations, these two items will be included, which I think is significant. So first of all, this nutritional group, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, has advised the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture actually is also into growing like animals. I mean, like farming, what you call it. Animals, yeah. So into that. But also, having the interest in that, they are saying that the ideal diet that Americans should eat is a plant-based diet. The addition is, there were several things that were added. One thing I didn't mention on this slide was, one thing that was added was that This is so significant, and the gut microbiome is so significant that children, even less than 2 years old, should be raised on a plant-based diet. So that was one of the first in this document, the 800-something pages, that even less than 2 years old, children can eat this, and that's a better diet for them. I have a question right over here.
Are you going to define microbiome?
Yes, I'll talk about that. All right, thank you very much. The pastor's asked the question, am I going to define microbiome? And I am going to define it when we get to one really significant part in cardiovascular disease. Okay. And also recognizing that the gut microbiome, and there's lots of talk about that these days in the lay press even. All right, so let's move on. Michael Pollan is just a nutrition writer, and he said, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Pretty simple. Okay, so what is a plant-based diet? A plant-based diet is deriving the majority of your calories, and that would be 80 to 100% of your calories from the green box food, these remarkably health-promoting food. That's what a plant-based diet is. So it's not necessary that you eat everything is plant-based, but 80% to 100% of your calories need to be derived from this. Now, much has been talked about in terms of the Mediterranean diet. So what about the Mediterranean diet? First of all, in 1993 was when the World Health Organization and the European branch of the World Health Organization and Harvard School of Public Health got together and began to introduce the Mediterranean diet pyramid to the world so we could appreciate what that was. First of all, the Mediterranean diet is not a single diet. It is based on geography and time. It was really developed from the islands in southern Italy, Crete, and Greece. And they're all a little bit different, but they have several things in common. First of all, what is it? It is a diet that's based mostly on plants. So you get points. There's a scoring system for eating grains, beans. Beans are really important. Fruits, vegetables, olive oil, fish, and a small amount of wine, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, okay? So hang tight. No one walk out of here and say, Lindy Schwartz said, okay, I just lost everything. Lindy Schwartz said to eat, to drink wine, because that's not what we're saying. All right. We're going to catch it again. There we are, right back up one. There you go. Very good. But we're going to come back to this. You lose points for eating dairy, poultry, and red meat. And the benefits were reduction of cardiovascular disease, even cancer. And so that's a really important thing. And why was this group of people being studied in the first place? When this was being studied, these people had very limited access to health care, but it was found that they had less chronic disease and they had less mortality. So with what they were eating, somehow, with the limited access to health care, they had all these things. These two studies are significant. The Lyon Heart study, which was actually a secondary prevention study. In other words, secondary means you already have the disease. Now you change course, you change your diet, and what happens to that? How does that impact all these diseases? Primary means you do it before anything bad happens to you. So when they deconstruct the data, first of all, there are tons of studies in the United States as well as in Europe looking at this particular diet. And I just put 3 on the screen right here. If you look at this one right here, for example, 41,000 people were involved in that study, more than 41,000. This one here was published in New England Journal of Medicine in June of 2018. And there's some controversy around that particular study. It had to be republished because of randomization issues. But anyway, but when they deconstructed all the data that they had from hundreds of thousands of people, when they deconstructed the data, what they found was that more plants, better outcomes. More meat, worse outcomes. And the most important thing, this is what I want you to take home, the fish, the olive oil, and the wine were not the primary benefit for this diet. The benefit really is in plant-based diet. So it doesn't have anything to do with the Mediterranean diet. You always say the Mediterranean diet is olive oil and whatnot. That's not the case. It's the plants. That's the most important thing about this study. Okay. So, first quiz question. Okay. So pay attention. Which of the following is the #1 source of calories among Americans aged 2 and up? By the way, if you already heard this, You don't get to vote. So what is the number one source of calories among Americans ages 2 and up? Is it sugar-sweetened beverages? And I'm going to ask for hands in a second. Is it dessert, breads, bagels and rolls, or cheese and cheese products? Who said it's sugar-sweetened beverages? Okay, I have a lot of hands for sugar-sweetened beverages. How many say dessert? Okay, you say dessert. So we have one person saying dessert. How about breads, bagels, and rolls? Okay, some people for that. And how about cheese and cheese products? Cheese products. Okay, my first gift. You get the first gift. So, you got the answer right, and it is dessert. Look at this right here. So the top sources of calories among Americans greater than 2 years old is grain-based dessert. That's the number one source of calories. What's number two? It is breads, white bread and rolls, mixed grain bread, flavored breads and bagels. Now what's number three? Any guesses what number three is? You got to talk fast. If you don't, the airtime is dead. But what is number three? It's actually, I heard something. It's not soda. Sugary cereal. Cheese, you said. It's chicken. So it's chicken. Now, I have to tell you the statistic that still amazes me. And so Americans eat 1 million chickens an hour. 25 million chickens a day. That's amazing. So, you know, I see these trucks, you know, with the white chickens going down the road and the feathers are kind of coming out every once in a while. You want to stop the truck and let all the chickens out because it's amazing what Americans eat. Chicken is number three. That's a significant. Now, number four is soda. What do you think number five is? What did you say? Sugary drinks? Well, we got the sugary drinks, the soda and the energy and sports drink and so forth. It's pizza. Pizza is in a category all by itself. People love that. That's number five. All right. So if you look at this graphic right here, put another way, and I hope you can see this really well, 70% of our calories that Americans eat are derived from processed and ultra-processed foods. If you look at this one right here, this is the ultra-processed food. This is the industrially produced, highly palatable, scientific, to keep you coming back for 58%, 12%. Let me do this one first. And I'm going to come back to that box up there because if you look at this right here, this is the 70% of Americans eat. They prioritize their calories in these unhealthy foods. These are the unprocessed or minimally processed foods and ultra-processed foods. This group is right over here, the processed foods. Now, if you look at this, it says 30%, looks like it's pretty good. But 14% of this right here is meats, milk, and eggs. The majority of what we eat, only 14% of what we eat, the paucity of our calories are spent eating root vegetables, whole grains, and things like that. So the whole idea is, how do you get Americans, how do you get people, or neighbors and so forth, to begin to prioritize their food in a more healthy way? And that's what we're going to begin to look at here in a little bit. Okay, so we look at cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance, and I have only 2 slides on cancer because, as I mentioned in the beginning, these non-communicable diseases include cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. Not all cancers, but some cancer. Okay, so first we're going to look at cardiovascular disease, and I do want to look at these blue zones. Blue zones are areas that enjoy enviable longevity. And there are different regions. I want to give a shout out to many of us very fondly know Loma Linda. It's one of these blue zones. And the question is, what is it that brings these blue zones together? It's the diet that is rich in good carbohydrates, beans, lentils, legumes. That joins this group together. If you look at their plate, the plate is prioritized with these healthy foods, and if they're eating any kind of meat, it's at the side of the plate. On holidays, or maybe some special occasion, it's at the side. It's not the center of the plate, it's the side of the plate. And that's what's really important. Now, the next group is these Simani people from Bolivia. These people have 2 things that sets them apart from everybody else. Their diet consists, 72% is from carbohydrates. And by saying that, I mean these whole grains, fruits and vegetables and nuts and so forth. So 72%, 14% each is protein and fat. That's how these people eat. So what they did is, the American College of Cardiology actually did a study on these people, and they went there, had them come actually to the major city, and they did a CT scan of their blood vessels looking for calcium buildup. And it turns out that 85% of them, 85% had a calcium score of 0. And that's a really good test. That calcium score really predicts the possibility that you can develop a heart attack down the road. And a 0 score means you're probably not going to get anything. 85% of the population had that. 3%, only 3% of them had a score that would predict that they could develop a heart attack. Now, what do you suppose the Americans, when they studied Americans between the age of 45 and 75, those that had a 0 calcium score, what percent do you think it was? 2%. It was 14%. Now, the interesting thing about these Somali people, that 0 calcium score was persistent above the age of 75. Above the age of 75, 65% of them had calcium scores of 0. That's significant. So first of all, their diet. Secondly, and really importantly, so far as their waking time, they only spend 10% of their waking time idle, doing nothing. Americans spend 50% of the times sitting down, doing nothing, no activity. So that's part of the issue with these people. It's very important. So what we're going to look at now is, what do these green, yellow, and red boxes have to do with cardiovascular disease? And what we see is, this particular study here was done by this particular researcher, and he looked at the whole breadth of all of the prospective cohort studies. These are good studies that were done looking at the association between red meat and ultra-processed meat on these kind of diseases, specifically looking at cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and insulin and cancer. And what he found out was that these ultra-processed and processed meats had a significant impact on both diabetes and cardiovascular disease, and also on cancers. Very important. So there is a relationship between these things. Conversely, these researchers, there's a bunch of them there, there's 3 studies there. These researchers looked at, what if somebody ate a plant-based diet? How does that affect cardiovascular disease specifically? The first 2 studies were done looking at mortality data. The other one was the chance of developing something. A case, like you had a heart attack, didn't die of it, but you had a case, or you had a stroke, or you had colon cancer. Now, this in particular had to do with cardiovascular disease. Dr. Key, who is from Oxford University in London, he actually had been looking at Loma Linda Adventists, of whom at that time, 50% of them were plant-based vegetarians. He noticed that they were dying of less cardiovascular disease, and they also had less incidence of disease. They also had less cancers. So he thought, let me study this. So he ended up doing a very nice study, prospective study for 20 years in England, looking at 6,000 vegetarians, 5,000 non-vegetarians. The vegetarians recruited their friends who were not vegetarian, and he looked at them, and he saw the exact same thing. Between the 2 groups, there was 24% decrease in mortality. Very similar to Dr. Huang. Dr. Huang, this study here was actually a meta-analysis study, the different kind of research, and they found the same thing. This group right here, this is very similar to some of the large trials in the States that we look at. And this now has to do with cases, not mortality, but cases. 32% less cases by eating a plant-based diet. Now, this we're going to talk about the gut microbiome. So, as we look at this, we're going to look at what is it about meat that portends such a poor prognosis when you eat it. So this is something I want everyone to get in your head. Long-term eating habits affect your gut flora. So I want to say it again. Long-term eating habits, has to be the long-term eating habits affect your gut flora. Did you guys know that you have almost 40 trillion organisms, microbes in your gut? Do you know that? That's normal, actually. It's normal. Almost 40 trillion different kind of organisms, bacteria, and so forth, live in your gut. And the food you eat informs what kind of bacteria develop in your gut. Does that make sense, right? So microbes, we talked about gut microbiome. The microbiome is bacteria living in your gut. So as you eat, food as medicine, you are what you eat. And more we begin to appreciate the fact that what you're eating is changing your gut microbes. So you know how sometimes you get an antibiotic and they want to give you a probiotic? The most important probiotic you can get is your prebiotic. That's what you eat. Because what you eat changes and develops the different bacteria. So what is it about this meat? So having said that, the very first study to make a link between atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease and the gut bacteria was published in the journal Nature, which is a worldwide, very awesome journal, in 2011. That was the first time people began to think, you know what? Somehow the gut microbiome, the flora, is associated with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. There's a link between that. I had a colleague once, decades ago, in fact, it was one of Dr. Batchelor's partners. She always said, everything is infectious. It's infectious diseases. Cardiovascular disease is an infectious disease. I remember thinking to myself, this was like 30 years ago, I thought, that makes no sense. It turns out it actually is related. So, since then, many papers have been published in various journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, and we have two references right here, New England Journal of Medicine. This group is from the Cleveland Clinic. So the Cleveland Clinic has been researching this for some time. And what they've discovered is this. You see here on this plate, some red meat, some eggs and cheese. There are two different substances, actually. One of them is phosphatidylcholine, which is in these foods. The other is L-carnitine. L-carnitine is in this red meat. Phosphatidylcholine is in cheese and eggs, dairy. So what happens when you eat this? Cheese and all this stuff, that's what your diet consists of. So you eat this, the gut flora, that's the microbiome, Pastor. This is the bacteria. The gut flora will metabolize this stuff to something called trimethylamine, okay? It goes in the liver and becomes what we call oxidized. Oxidation often changes things into some bad substances. And it becomes oxidized to something called trimethylamine N oxide, TMAO. I want you to put that in your head. TMAO is a bad substance. Now, I've been a vegetarian my whole life. I've been plant-based most of my life. I don't make this. Where is it? I don't make TMAO. If you eat meat, however, long-term meat eater and so forth, the chance of that you'll have TMAO is significant. So first of all, what does this bad substance do? It is proatherogenic. It makes the blood clots happen. In your blood vessels, it causes stroke, heart attack, and death. That's what it does, okay? So why is that? The mechanism, there's a whole bunch of things over here you don't need to pay attention to. But death from heart disease, congestive heart failure is increased by doing this. So what they did is, the Cleveland Clinic, they decided to give a bunch of plant-based people a steak, have them eat a steak. They couldn't find anybody who would do that. So instead, they gave them L-carnitine pills. And then they began to check the TMAO levels. What they found was those people didn't make TMAO. They can't make TMAO. If you do it over a long period of time, you begin to make it. But this is a difficult, a dangerous substance. So that's the first thing about that. Now, I don't want to leave sugar off the table, because sugar is also an atherogenic. By that we mean it causes hardening of the arteries. It accelerates the process. So if you look at this right up here, you see this beautiful array of colors. Beautiful array of colors, right? And when you go to that aisle, you just feel good. One time I was in the grocery store, and a lady, she was in the bean section, the canned beans. And she said to me, I don't know what I looked, I must have looked, I don't know. I may have thought she thought I worked at Kroger. I don't know, but I was at Kroger. She thought I worked there. And she said, can you help me? I said, sure. She said, what should I which kind of beans should I buy? Can I buy these beans? I said, well, tell me a little bit about your medical story. She said, well, my doctor said that I have diabetes, but I can't eat salt. I said, are you sure you don't have high blood pressure? She goes, I don't have that. I said, okay, well, are you sure? He said sugar. He said salt. I can't eat salt. So she looked at the cans and so forth, and I said, okay, well, you know, if you look at the front, it tells you kind of low sodium, whatever. And then we parted ways, and now I found her in the cereal aisle. So she's now in the cereal aisle. She says to me, what cereal should I buy? I thought to myself, none of this stuff. It's really funny. If you have kids, you know that the cereal aisle is the most dangerous aisle in the grocery store. It has to do with these colors right here. Do you know that even corn flakes has sugar in it, added sugar in it? All these things have added sugar in them. There are two studies, and in the interest of time, I can't go through them in detail at all, but these two are very significant. They looked at two different things. First of all, the amount of salt that we eat, amount of sugar that we eat was significant. They divided this up into less than 10% of the diet from sugar, or more than 25% of your calories from sugar. And so if you are at the high end of sugar, you had a significant risk of cardiovascular mortality, okay? So that's the important piece about that. But not all carbohydrates are equal, and so this study was done looking at the glycemic load. Now, if you're a diabetic or know of a diabetic, have a family member that's a diabetic, you always think about that. What does glycemic load means? Glycemic load basically means how fast does what you're eating spike your insulin level. And if the food is very rich in sugar, the insulin level goes up very, very quickly. So that's what it's looking at. The glycemic load has to do with how fast do you spike your insulin. If insulin goes up quickly, that's what begins to cause problems. So you have to worry about that. Okay, the American Heart Association has a recommendation that men eat, I'm not telling you to eat it, no more than 9 teaspoons of sugar a day, and women 6 teaspoons of sugar a day. Okay, so as you try to transition people to trying to figure out what they should eat. Whoops, I'm sorry about that. I hit something. As you try to get people to eat more fruit and vegetables, the question is, what is the dose-response relationship between eating fruit and vegetables and protecting you against cardiovascular mortality? It turns out that 2.5 servings is probably where you get some benefit. The benefit continues up to 10 servings a day. At 2.5 servings a day, you have 8% less coronary heart disease, 16% less stroke, and 10% less all-cause mortality. What's 2.5 servings a day? It's a small banana, an apple, and some broccoli. Okay, so that's basically what it is, what you're looking at. Okay. A word of caution, not every plant-based food is really plant-based. Okay? The reason for that is French fries are plant-based. Soda is probably plant-based. Okay? So the Harvard School of Public Health did this study looking at plant-based diet. If you say plant-based, I'm eating a plant-based diet, including all the fried whatnot and so forth, mashed potatoes and all that, it looks as if an overall diet, plant-based diet, and these lines you can't really see them, this one here is the healthy plant-based food. They divide it up so you have healthy plant-based and unhealthy. And if you look at the healthy plant-based food, you see that the benefit, the decrease in cardiovascular incidence of cardiovascular disease is 25% less. If you look at the unhealthy, though, it's increased by 32%. So you have to figure out exactly what you're eating. Not all plant-based is plant-based. We have to look at a healthy plant-based diet. All right. Now, this is great. And so plant foods and cardiovascular health mechanisms. How do plant-based foods protect you from heart disease? There are several things mentioned here. First of all, they do decrease, they replace the disease-promoting foods. They improve your LDL, reduce inflammation. They alter the gut microbiome like we talked about. If you eat plant-based diet, the bad bacteria don't inhabit your gut. They go someplace else. That's a really, really significant one. They can lower the blood pressure because of high potassium and so forth, decrease lipids. Now, I skipped this one because it's really important. Every fatty meal you eat is inflammatory. and causes an inflammatory storm in your body. Every fatty meal you eat causes an inflammatory storm in your body. The endothelium, which is the lining of your blood vessels, is stunned. They don't know what to do once you've eaten that. So I'll tell you a story first, because this story sticks in my head because I've heard this story repeated time and time and again ever since this first happened to me. So I had two residents. One of them, you guys would know because he's an awesome guy. He used to come play the piano beautifully. He was a plant-based vegetarian. And he was talking to one of the other residents about trying plant-based diet for at least a week. So he said, okay. The guy was from Kentucky, and he said, no, I like my meat and potatoes, whatnot. Finally, he was convinced to go on a plant-based diet, and he did. And he tried it for a week. And he came to me and said to me, you know what? My mind has cleared up. I said, wow, I've never heard that before. Your mind's cleared up. The guy, first of all, was brilliant. He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But he said, I like meat, so I'm going to go back to my meat. But he told me later, he goes, every time I went back to meat, my mind got fuzzy, so I have to go back to the plant-based and get my mind right, then I go back to the meat and kept this back and forth thing. I said, what is that that's causing that? I believe it's related to this inflammatory storm. We have always looked at heart disease in terms of the long term, that if you keep doing something down the road, you're going to end up with blockage of your blood vessels. So we try to mitigate your risk factors. We try to get your blood pressure controlled, your blood sugars controlled, your cholesterol controlled, your weight controlled, stop smoking, all that kind of stuff to control the disease, when in fact we don't consider what the hour-to-hour variation happens in your blood vessels because of what we eat. So this is the case that when you eat, the endothelium, the lining of the blood vessel, produces nitric oxide that causes the blood vessel to open up more to get more blood flow. When you eat all that bad food, your blood vessels don't produce this nitric oxide that helps dilate, open up your blood vessels so that when you're doing things, you can think properly and so forth. The problem is that you eat this inflammatory diet for breakfast. 5 hours later, it's time for lunch. And then 5 hours later, it's time for dinner. And so you keep eating all this pro-inflammatory food. So just remember that every fatty meal causes an inflammatory storm in your blood vessels. So that's really important. Now, I want to switch over now to insulin resistance. And this is going to be really important. We're going to look again at how these red, yellow, and green box foods apply to insulin resistance. Now, this, I'm sure, is going to be news to people. So let me ask a question. How many people in here believe that diabetic can eat fruit? Okay, very good, awesome. Let me ask you another question. There's a quiz about fruit. Okay, there's a quiz about fruit. Okay. Apple. Fruit. Okay, very good. Mango. Fruit, good. Zucchini. It's a fruit. Okay. So how many thought zucchini was a fruit? Okay, very good. A few people thought it was a fruit. All right, very good. So that's a really important thing. Okay, so we're going to look very quickly at the mechanism of what happens when you eat fruit. Okay. So when you eat fruit, your blood sugar goes up, glucose. It signals, and by the way, this banana right here just represents fruit. It signals the pancreas to produce insulin. Then insulin will bind to the receptor on the liver cell or the skeletal muscle cell. And through a series of reactions inside the cell, it causes this substance, this GLUT4, it's like it's opening this gate here, allowing glucose to come into the cell. Does that make sense? So you eat the fruit, or whatever you eat, that allows the glucose to signal the pancreas to make insulin. It binds to the receptor on the cell membrane. A whole bunch of technical stuff happens in here. And then this GLUT4 goes to the membrane, takes the glucose into the cell. Okay. Now, let's say instead you have insulin resistance. Insulin resistance. And now you eat the sugar, the fruit. And this is very true because I'll tell you something that happens to me all the time. My residents will always come and tell me This person wants fruit, a diabetic. He keeps asking for fruit, type 2 diabetic, keep asking for fruit. He shouldn't be asking for fruit. That's what's causing his problem. I said, it's not causing his problem. Okay, so now what's the problem? So now you have insulin resistance, you eat the fruit, it tries to do the same thing, but now the glucose really isn't going to the cell the way it's supposed to be. And the question is, what is the issue? There are what we call fatty or fatty subtypes that build up in here inside these cells. So now when you eat the banana, it produces glucose, the pancreas gets signaled to produce insulin, but no longer is the mechanism working. So now the blood sugar goes up, and what do? You blame the banana. When the banana is just an innocent victim. It's not the cause of the blood sugar problem. So what causes these lipid subtypes from, that build up in the cells? It really is meat. And I'll show you that in a little bit. So this was a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine by Dr. Schulman, who is from Yale. And there's a whole bunch of work in this area. One of the foremost diabetologists in the world, Dr. Ralph DeFranco, is at the University of Texas, San Antonio. And he is world famous. And he's published lots of stuff about this mechanism that causes this. So if you look at skeletal muscle and liver cells, the primary cause of the insulin resistance is the effect it has on these two types of cells. And basically, what you're looking at is there's more energy intake than energy expenditure. So you have obesity. And obesity really causes the fat to occur in the cells they're not supposed to occur to, and not just staying in adipose tissue. And all these other things, excess calories, all these things happen as a result of that. This particular physician here, this researcher, began to look at 12 different food groups and their effect on the risk of diabetes. And this is what they found. The risk of diabetes was greatest with people eating processed meat and red meat. If you add these two together, this comes up to 54% compared to the sugar-sweetened beverages. Yes, sugar-sweetened beverages are bad, but when you look at really what's causing your problem, it's the red meat. That's what's causing the buildup of fatty substrates inside these cells. That's what's causing the problem. Okay, so this is a complicated slide, but it's just meant to show that red meat and processed meat, via all these various mechanisms. Here we see, remember we talked about this, the phosphatidylcholine L-carnitine producing the TMAO. All these different mechanisms end up with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. It is the meat that's causing the problem. It's not the fruit that's causing the problem. Or diabetic patients should be eating a plant-based diet that also is rich in fruit as well. So these several studies here, what I want to talk about this concept of a low-carb diet. I get really concerned when I find my patients being carb controlled at the hospital. I agree that if you're giving them, refined sugar, refined grains, or you're giving them, things that are just really unhealthy for them, that's a problem. However, the question is, what is the best diet for a diabetic? Okay? Now, I won't go through all of these in great detail, but the first two studies here were really important. And basically, these are also from the Harvard School of Public Health. And what they did is Dr. Bao, for example, was looking at women who had what we call gestational diabetes. And they looked at two groups, and this was from the Nurses' Health Study, was what Dr. Bao did. Dr. Koenig, the other one, his was based on the Health Professions Follow-Up Study. And these are hundreds of thousands of people involved in these studies. They followed them over 20 years' time, looking at their incidence of diabetes after they've had gestational diabetes. Gestational diabetes does not mean you'll become a diabetic for sure. It is a risk factor for developing diabetes. And what they found is the women were somewhere on low carbohydrate, high animal protein, high animal fat diet, or a low carbohydrate, high plant or vegetable source protein and vegetable fat. And what they found is that the people that were on the low carbohydrate, high animal protein, high animal fat diet were the ones that end up developing diabetes. The source of the protein matters, and insulin resistance is the mechanism, and that's what that's all about. These two papers down here relate to the fact that even though someone may go on a low-carb diet for like, a period of time, maybe for a year, you can improve things, but long-term, it does not last. You don't end up with the benefit that you think you should have. So that's not good. And again, we don't want to leave sugar off the table. How does sugar affect diabetes? There are two different mechanisms, basically, by which sugar affects diabetes. First of all, you can, just eating all these sugary drinks, your liver can make lipids in it. It can make lipids in the liver and make a fatty liver. In the skeletal muscle, fat also builds up. Remember, the fat building up in the skeletal muscle and the liver cells are causing insulin resistance. And then also it causes obesity. You just gain weight. So that's the problem. Next question. Which type of foods are most protective against type 2 diabetes? Okay, so cruciferous vegetables, berries, whole grains, or fish. Who said it's the cruciferous vegetables? I see one hand up there. It's cruciferous vegetables. How about berries? Okay, just a few hands. How about whole grains? Okay, a lot of hands for whole grains. That's not for fish. Okay, I have 2 bags. Okay, 2 bags. Let's see here. 2 bags left. Put the whole grain people, put your hand up. Again. Who said whole grains? Okay. I have 2 gifts. I'm going to give away 2 gifts. Brussels sprout. Fruit or vegetable? Vegetable. Okay, it's vegetable. Okay. All right. You guys have to fight this out. So.
No, give it to someone else who is not.
Okay. Okay, I'll give that to you. 1 for you. Okay, now what you'll find in these bags is interesting. Ashavadi, what is an avocado? It's a fruit. Okay, avocado is a fruit. Everybody that got gifts, you'll see in your bag an avocado. Avocado is awesome. It's a fat, but it's the kind of fat that you can actually eat, okay? And so I was talking about coconut oil in the beginning. Those kind of tropical oils should probably be avoided. The vegetable oils are the ones you can eat, and those are fine. And then you'll also see in your bags whole grain bread in one bag. There is beans in another bag, and then there's nuts in another bag. That's what the gifts are. The question then is, what is it about whole grains that are so effective? It has to do with cereal fiber. Cereal fiber is great. We can't discuss all this in detail, but the cereal fiber is the key, and it does several things. It improves the postprandial, that's after you eat, the glucose response. Increases the sense that you're full. And most importantly, it produces these short-chain fatty acids. These short-chain fatty acids are important to the immune system. In fact, they improve the gut flora. The gut flora is the link between your gut and the immune system. Very important. These short-chain fatty acids are the link between the gut flora and your immune system. So that's really important. Okay. And I think I'm supposed to end at what time? 2:20. At 2:20. Okay, 2:20. All right. So if you look at this, this is probably my favorite study. And this study looks at, this was a study that was done in China. For some reason, in China, I don't know if it's they said it's probably because the belly fat seems to be increased. In China, diabetes is common. And they did a study, 500,000 Chinese people for all these various provinces, looking at fruit. They want to look at fruit specifically. They excluded fruit juice and excluded, canned fruit, just whole fruit. And it was 2 parts to the study. One of them was a secondary prevention study. The other was a primary prevention. In other words, people already have diabetes. They were looking at what's the effect on decreasing the complications of diabetes. Diabetes is not a single disease. It's a systemic disease. It causes eye problems and kidney problems and nerve problems and gut problems, all these things. Big cardiovascular problems, strokes, heart attacks, and all that. So, so they had these 2 arms looking at ones who already had diabetes and those who did not have it. 500,000 people. And what they found was, it is a fascinating study. It was over 7 years period of time that they looked at these people prospectively, which was really nice. And what they found is that daily fruit consumption, I am passionate about people allowing diabetics to eat fruit. Fruit is good for people. And 12% lower risk of diabetes. In those who had diabetes at baseline, fruit 3 times a week lowered all-cause mortality by 17%. Microvascular, that's when you get the kidney problems, the eye problems, even some of the nerve problems that you get. It decreased that by 28%, and the macrovascular, that's the heart attack and stroke, that's the big vessel disease, by 13%. So that's a really important thing. Fruit is good for diabetics. In fact, it is not evidence-based for physicians to tell patients that they cannot eat fruit. So, I love this slide. Fruit is not guilty. That's not the cause of the problem. Like we showed in the other first slide back there, this really has to do with eating meat. That's where the problem is. Now, this study here is also important, and this one had to do with, this was a prospective study, again. There was a nurses' health study, this is from the Harvard School of Public Health, and it looked at plant-based dietary patterns, type 2 diabetes in all kinds of people. 4.8 million person-years of follow-up. The risk of type 2 diabetes on a plant-based diet, 20% lower risk. If you look, that's overall. Remember we said about healthy, plant-based, unhealthy? If you separated the two, actually the risk was a decline of 34% less risk, looking at a healthy plant-based diet as opposed to an unhealthy plant-based, where there was an increased risk of 16%. And this was independent of other risk factors. There was also one thing I've neglected to mention when we talked about TMAO, and that has to do with the fact that, when you think about cardiovascular disease, you think about, risk factors like cholesterol, high bad cholesterol, not enough good cholesterol, and all this kind of stuff. And independent of those risk factors, TMAO was a risk factor, even if those other areas were normal. So what you eat is affecting your chance of having kind of disease. Now, I love this particular study. This was the first, actually, randomized controlled trial that was done by Dr. Neil Bernard, and this was done early in 2000s. No, it's probably around like 2000. I forgot when it was exactly. It was in the high, like 2005, and it was a long period of time he did the study. He actually looked at just a very few patients over 74 weeks, and he gave them a plant-based diet, one group plant-based diet, versus the American Diabetes Association diet. That's pretty risky. When the American Diabetes Association said, eat this, and he says, no, eat this, and his diet was comprised of 75% of whole grain, plant-based carbohydrate, and 15% of it was protein, 12% of it was fat. And something like 10%, whatever it was fat. So he looked at that. And when he looked at that, they had the low-fat, plant-based, the low-calorie diet, actually, conventional ADA diet. They had better glycemic control with a plant-based diet. And they had better reduction in their lipids and weight loss with a plant-based diet. What's interesting is diabetics, we measure not the blood sugar in the moment, but we also look at over a long period of time how the control has been. It's called a hemoglobin A1C. It's a special test. And the decrease in the hemoglobin A1C endured for the duration of the trial period and beyond, whereas those who had the conventional diet, and this is more of a technical slide, if you had the American Diabetes Association diet, you didn't really improve your hemoglobin A1C, but if you had the plant-based diet, you continue to have a lowering of your hemoglobin A1C, which is really important. So the take-home from this section is this. In terms of diabetes, diabetics need a high whole grain carbohydrate diet. Carb control has to do with that red box side we looked at that one slide, has nothing to do with the whole grains. If you give somebody a low-carb diet, you begin to diminish some of the nutrients that they need, the whole grains, the plants, the fruits, and so forth that they need, and it's probably going to end up being a bad diet. Now, these last two slides are about cancer, and I'll show you the final slide, and it'll be done. This is funny. Hope you can see this. In 2015, the World Health Organization declared processed meat as a carcinogen. They said it causes cancer. The Time magazine, this was the front of Time magazine that time in 2015, and I don't know if you can see this here, it says the war on delicious. That's kind of funny. So we had all these articles being published by the, all these different magazines. Processed meat causes cancer, says the World Health Organization. Ham, sausages cause cancer. Red meat probably does too, World Health Group says. Hot dogs, bacon, other processed meats cause cancer, World Health Organization declares. It was all over the place. It was crazy. So what does it mean? There are different types of carcinogens by group. There's group 1, there's 2A, 2B, and 3, and so forth. What they said was that these processed meats got a group 1 classification. It included bacon, sausages, hot dogs, salami. So what does exactly mean, though, still? It does not mean that meat is as bad as tobacco. That's not what we're saying. What's being said is that the weight of the evidence that these processed meats are group 1 carcinogen and the weight of the evidence that smoking causes cancer are the same value. In other words, the evidence is there. If you put it in a scale, that's equal evidence that it causes cancer, okay? Now, I showed you a study before. You might not remember it, but when that guy was looking at all the studies, looking at the link of red meat and cardiovascular disease, what they're looking there primarily is colorectal cancer, some pancreatic cancer, some prostate cancer, and some breast cancer, but primarily colorectal cancer. It's not talking about things like maybe leukemia and things like that, or all cancers, but certain types of cancer are associated with that. And in that vein also, red meat was given a group 2A, means that it possibly causes cancer. They didn't include chicken and fish. That's because I think it has to do with the chicken industry. Anyway, but I wanted to show you this beautiful array of what God created. God made so many colors for us to eat, awesome food. And all these rainbow of colors give us all the micronutrients, the phytochemicals, I also call them phytonutrients, that we need for good health. And the Lord himself said, and God said, of every herb that yields seed, of every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food. I don't believe that God was trying to deprive us of gustatory enjoyment. He gave us food that we can cook and make awesome food out of because he cared so much about us. And I think that as we look at food and we look at disease, as I see people every day, you have no idea, as I see people every day, I have patients that I admit to the hospital that are my age. And I'm looking, I'm thinking, 64? No way. It's unbelievable. Look like 94. And I say, the Lord came to give us abundant health. He said, I have come to give you abundant life. And we need to ourselves model it and share it with others, because that's really where the power comes from, is in sharing the good news of this health message. It's not to restrict us, it's to protect us. So I pray that everyone will kind of share what we've learned today. And thank you very much.
Sleep. Why do it? Can't we just sleep when we're dead?
No,
we're too busy. We don't have time to sleep. There's other things we can do. But there's actually 3 good reasons why we should.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you turn this mic on? Goes to Adelaide's mic.
That Pastor has a question too. I'll take yours while we're doing that.
I didn't hear you specifically talk about it, but I assume you know about it. Are there any studies, not so much about what people eat, but overeating and the harmful effects of that? Other, obviously gaining weight, but I mean beyond that.
Okay, so
You haven't finished digesting your previous meal, and then you pile another one in there.
yeah. And Javi has done some really good work looking at this as well. So we're supposed to eat, I believe, with a certain interval. I think Ellen White says 5 hours between our meals, without snacking in between. Personally, I believe that we're supposed to eat. I'm going to have a long answer for your question. I'm going to make it short as possible. We're supposed to eat the majority of our calories, I believe, probably before 4 o'clock. So we eat breakfast. I personally believe breakfast. Now, and Javi can speak to this as well, but I believe we're supposed to eat a good breakfast, and then a very good lunch, and then we're done. I personally like to believe that we're done. So what overeating basically says that a person eats more than they should. They have more calorie intake, energy intake, than energy expenditure. Obviously, in our society, with the obesity rate in our society and overweight, it's taking a toll. And we can clearly see there is no way. You know something? There was a patient admitted to the hospital. He's still in the hospital, we admitted. 800-something pounds. And you know what he said? I don't eat much. And so there is no question that overeating, the symptom that when you look at it, you see overweight and obesity. That's what it is. When you look at type 2 diabetes, the majority of type 2 diabetes can be prevented by eating appropriately. So when we eat too much and become obese, that's when insulin resistance develops. Now, one thing I should have said was that when you look at type 2 diabetes, there are about two different, for simplicity, two different types of cells in the pancreas related to blood sugar regulation. There's the beta cells in the pancreas. So the beta cells are the ones that are producing the insulin, and it is loss of beta cell function, ultimately, that causes type 2 diabetes. But before you get there, there's insulin resistance. When you eat, all this stuff comes in. That excess adipose stuff overflows into the liver cell and the skeletal muscle cell, causing insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. When I hear people talking in the grocery store or the Sam's, wherever it is, and they are obese, and say, well, I'm going to get diabetes because my so-and-so had diabetes. Remember I showed you on the first slide there? It's not genetics. It's not this and that. It is poor dietary choices. That's what's causing our problem. And we need to deal with that issue. Now, Javi is really big into intermittent fasting, and I actually agree with that. Intermittent fasting, so if I eat breakfast, and then I eat my lunch at like 1 o'clock, and I try to make it so it's 5 hours between those two meals, then I don't eat after that, you know, that would be a fast. So there is some excellent, awesome data that 16-hour fast to 18-hour fast are actually beneficial for the body. And I think that that's a really good thing. Now, some people choose to eat dinner because, and I want to be very sympathetic to families. Families need to eat together. I believe families should eat together. The family that prays together stays together. The family that eats together also stays together. So I like the family situation. So if you have to eat your lunch and dinner, do that. You have to skip breakfast. Breakfast gets me going in the day, though, so that's really important. What I do with Brian eats supper, and so I make his supper really nice, and I sit down with him and watch him eat it. It's really interesting. So that's the one way for me to get my situation going. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great. Javi.
Dr. Schwartz, first off, that was a great presentation. Two, you're obviously an awesome wife for doing that. Can you reverse the buildup in your arteries if you had a long lifetime of eating meat products?
Yes. So the question is, can you reverse the buildup in the arteries of that? Yes, absolutely you can. And there's a video I will refer you to. It's called Forks Over Knives. Dr. Esselstyn from the Cleveland Clinic actually saw it, and now he has a diet. Now, and if somebody has buildup in the blood vessels already, the diet that you need to eat to reverse it is slightly different than what I've presented today. For example, everybody who got special bags got avocados. In the Esselstyn diet, there's no avocados in it. There's no added oils and so forth. But you can reverse it. That's the good news. You can reverse it. We have a friend of ours who had a calcium score that I think it was 800 or what it was, if it was. And typically you don't recheck the CT scan to see if that calcium score has changed. But he has committed himself to following the Esselstyn diet. It is amazing what he does. We've had him at our home, and I go through all these recipes to find a dressing I can make that has no oil in it. You have to be willing to do it. If you care about your health, you're willing to do whatever it takes to have a clear mind and a well-functioning body. And I think that's where it takes really commitment to health in order to do that. So, but yes, you can.
Okay, great. You talked a lot about whole grain bread. What do you think about things like the wheat belly diet and people that say bread is bad?
Okay, so let me say first, so the question is, I talk about whole grain being good. What about people who believe the wheat belly thing and think that wheat is bad? I don't know a whole lot about this, to tell you the honest truth, but I will say this about it. There is a kind of a thing going on related to gluten sensitivity and all that kind of thing. I don't know what that is, gluten sensitivity. I know what sprue is, celiac disease is, which is very rare, actually. It's not that common. The majority of people who say they can't eat wheat and they have a gluten-sensitive thing don't actually have celiac disease. If you test them, they don't have celiac disease. I don't know exactly what it is. If it has to do with some of the way crops are grown and some of the poisons, the toxins, and organic, non-organic. It could have something to do with that. You know, I'm from the West Indies. My mom used to make bread. She still does, actually. Whole wheat bread. I think I told you before. She made 100% whole wheat bread. It had not one thing to stick it together, just crumbs is all it was. And I grew up in a good West Indian home. So I've always liked bread. And I feel sorry for you, Kenny, but I think if you find good quality bread, you should be able to eat bread. I am concerned, and my personal bias might be a little bit suspicious about this whole trend in gluten sensitive, gluten this and that. And so I'm a little suspicious of it because everything's got gluten something in it. Mayonnaise, who knows what all. It's got gluten in it. Are people really gluten sensitive or not? So I'm not really sure. The wheat belly thing is a question that, like I said, I don't know much about it. Just my personal opinion is all I have.
Okay, last question due to time. You talked a lot about carbs. Any comments on the ketogenic diet?
Oh, yes. So the question is about carbs and the ketogenic diet. The ketogenic, I like to stick my neck out. I don't try and make it so it sounds all right, but I believe that God gave us a balanced diet. That was the original diet. By the way, some people like to say God gave us these canines so we can eat meat. That's not the case. Gorillas have things, and they're vegetarian. They are. And so the fact of the matter is God gave us a balance of food. The nutrients, the phytonutrients that are protective in our bodies occur in these wonderful rainbow of carbohydrates that God has given us to eat. The ketogenic diet, I don't know that it is the best diet. I think that little of our diet should be protein. Like I told you, the Simani people in Bolivia, 72% of their diet is carbohydrate, complex, high fiber, whole grains. And 14% is protein, 14% is fat. They have enviable longevity. And they have calcium scores that cannot be contested. And, you know, they don't have any kind of problems. They're not obese people because they're not sedentary. I would say that we embrace a comprehensive health approach where we're active, we're exercising, we're eating right, and I think that's the best diet. Let me just say one other thing about diet, because I can't help myself. I don't believe in diets, to start with. That's a bad word. I believe in healthy eating. If we ate healthily, we wouldn't have to diet. We shouldn't be dieting. When people ask me about this diet, I say, don't diet. It's not going to help you. Start living right, and that's going to help you. So anyway, yes, one more question.
I have a question about oil.
Oil, yeah, good question.
You did touch on that a little, and you mentioned vegetable oil, but I would like to cook with coconut oil.
The flavor is magnificent.
How is that then compared to cooking with coconut oil, vegetable oil, which is better, which is not?
Yeah. So actually, I had a slide, and I didn't show it because there's too many. Like I said, the presentation I have is like over 2 hours long. But I have a slide in there. It came from I think it was the American College of Cardiology, American Heart Association, and they kind of categorize oils. Any tropical oil is probably don't eat it. And it has to do with the ratio of the monounsaturated, polyunsaturated to the saturated kind of fats. So based on that, I would say that those tropical oils should be avoided, or at least not used primarily. And the vegetable oils are the ones that we should be cooking with, vegetable oils. Now, I will say that coconut oil has a wonderful flavor, but if you use it sparingly. Remember what I said at the beginning, we need to understand that a plant-based diet means that you derive the majority of your calories 80% to 100%. Having said that, I still like to be on the healthier side as possible, and if there are other oils we can use the other oils. Vegetable oils as opposed to tropical oils. And that's where the division is, yeah. All right, I think we have to quit. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartz.
Thank you very much.
Sleep. Why do it? Can't we just sleep when we're dead? We're too busy. We don't have time to sleep. There's other things we can do. But there's actually 3 good reasons why we should sleep. 1, it helps your athletic sports performance. 2, it helps your brain function. And 3, whether you believe it or not, it actually helps you lose weight. The first thing, athletic performance. Sleep is a part of every elite athlete's recovery and training plan. If you don't sleep, you can't work out hard. If you just keep out working out hard, you're going to kill yourself quickly. Do you guys remember Gwen Jorgensen? She actually won the first women's triathlete medal in the Olympics for the United States. So what she would do is she'd work out hard in the morning, take a 1 or 2 hour nap, go work out again, and then she'd sleep for about 8 to 10 hours a night. If you do the math, she was sleeping 40 to 50% of her whole life. And to do that, that's one of the big things that made her an elite athlete. So it's really, really important. The second thing is brain function. Sleep, at the end of the day, is really important to consolidate all the knowledge, all the things you learned during the course of the day. If you don't do that, it's hard to put together, it's hard to organize it. And that's why a long period of sleep is very important to get your brain all organized. Finally, the third thing, sounds crazy, but it helps you lose weight. Many people think that if I just stay up all night long, I burn more calories and I'm going to actually lose weight. That's actually not what happens. There's a really good study where they had one group of people sleep normally. The other group, they kept them awake all night long. They measured what they ate and they did a functional MRI scan of their head the day afterward. And they found some interesting things. First, if you stayed up all night and did not sleep, you ate about 1,000 more calories than another group. And we all know this to be true. If we're trying to stay up late for an all-nighter in college or to finish a work project, we're always eating munchies to keep ourselves awake. So you're not burning more calories, you're actually taking in more calories. The second thing they found out is when they scanned their heads, the reward centers in your brain were turned on for the people that did not sleep. So the next day, they went looking for really fatty, rich foods because they felt like they deserved it. So the next day, after eating 1,000 more calories that night, they actually ate worse food. The third thing up in there is that they had worse willpower. So if you didn't sleep at all, you're tired, you see a donut, see some candy, you know what's going to happen? You're going to eat it. You're not going to be able to stop yourself. So all those things put together make you gain weight when you don't sleep. The other thing is when people are sleeping, remember there's a resting metabolic rate. Even when you're sleeping, you're burning calories. So that's really, really important. So how much should you sleep? It's different for different people, but about 6 to 9 hours a night is really good. Actually, if you increase your sleep by 1 hour more per night, it cuts your heart attack risk down by 20%. It has a huge impact. Now, it's going to be hard to go from 4 hours of sleep to 6, but what we recommend is if you can add maybe 15 or 30 minutes to the beginning of your sleep time, that's going to be great. And you can lengthen it little by little until you get up to like 6, 8, 9 hours of sleep. The other thing that helps sleep, cool room, 65 or 68 degrees. I know that sounds cold. Avoid caffeine, alcohol, and exercise 2 hours before you go to bed. Also, if you want to have a more restful sleep, try to eat the last thing 2 hours before you go to bed. That way your stomach's not all messed up and keeping you awake. Finally, the last thing, and this is really important, blue light from your devices. All right, you want to minimize that before you go to sleep because that messes up your melatonin secretion, which is an important hormone to help you go to sleep. So remember, sleep is really important. Go get some.
It's fine. 21. The lapel's good? It's green. The light's on your. It's been on. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Apologies for the technical difficulties. It happens. Thank you, Harvey, for that little sleep nugget, and also thank you to Lindy Schwartz. I really appreciate there at the end it's a lifestyle change, right? It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle change. And I hope no matter where you are in your lifestyle, whether you've been trying to live healthfully or maybe it's not something you've done before, that you would make small lifestyle changes. Choose a few things that you can work on. Maybe sleep is one of those things that you can do. Right now, I just want to introduce the next segment. We're going to go into a Q&A. Dr. Harvey Hahn, who is a board-certified cardiologist here in the Dayton-Kettering area, is going to be leading out in this, and I'll allow him to introduce those that are going to be a part of the Q&A. So thank you, Harvey, for being here.
My name's Harvey Hahn. I'm a board-certified cardiologist, and I have the pleasure of interviewing two people that have helped out in multiple of our diabetes undone courses. And first is Patsy Pierce, and the other is Bruce Batchelor. He's not a bachelor, though. He's actually married. Okay, that joke worked. I'm happy.
Since 1974.
Yeah, but more importantly, in the fact that they've helped out in our classes, is they themselves have actually personally gone through significant health changes, and that's why we want to interview them. First, ladies first. So Patsy, what made you want to make any change in your lifestyle?
Okay. First of all, I'm a registered nurse, so I've always been interested in good health. That's why I went into the profession I did. I've always tried to eat a healthy diet, what I thought was a healthy diet. And as time went on, I developed high blood pressure. My cholesterol was going up. My A1C got up to 6.4, 1/10 of a percentage point away from diabetes. And I was very frustrated. I felt like, I think I'm doing all the right things, and why are my numbers going up? And I couldn't understand it. Well, I had a checkup at my doctor, and I'd had the same doctor for about 35 years, so he knew me really well. And when he said the words to me, I want to prepare you, the next time that we do labs on you, it's inevitable that you're going to become a diabetic. And that had such a profound effect on me. And I thought, why are we not doing something to prevent this from happening? He was taking a wait-and-see approach. Well, that really frustrated me. So I asked him for something, anything he could offer. And he sent me to a dietitian that specialized in diabetes. And I sat with her for about an hour, and she really didn't tell me anything that I didn't know already. So I was further frustrated. And But I believe she mentioned a program, Diabetes Undone, which I had not heard of before. I wasn't aware of it. And so I started doing some research on that and found out that it was offered right here at this church. And I thought, this is in my back door. Why do I not know about this? And furthermore, why does my doctor not know about this? You know, why didn't he send me here a long time ago? So I took that course, and it was absolutely life-changing. One of the first things that they teach you in the course is, it's not about diet, it's about lifestyle. And I went, okay, that's different, you know, because I thought it was all these diet restrictions and carbs and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I went through that course, and it made such an impact on my life that I finally had a direction to go, and something that made sense to me that I just hadn't heard before. So I immediately signed up for the CHIP program to follow that, because I thought, I want more of this, I want more of this, you know. I'm just getting started here, and I need more of this. So I took the CHIP program. And after the program, you know, where they do your blood before and after, I didn't have as much what I thought was success or change, you know, for the better, as maybe some other people did. And I thought, geez, is there something wrong with me? You know, why is this not changing for me? But I just continued, as you told me to, just continue to do the right thing. Just continue, just continue. And a year later, I just went for my annual exam with a new doctor, by the way. I found a more holistic thinking doctor within the Kettering system. And he did my full ramp of labs. First of all, my blood pressure was normal. Well, it had not been normal since I was in my 20s. I was astonished. My cholesterol had gone from 250 down to 185. And let's see. Oh, and had A1C, that was 6.4. Had gotten as high as 6.4. Was down to 5.6 within normal range.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that was a day of celebration. In fact, a funny little bit. When I got the results, I was dancing around the house and singing and just so excited. My husband came and he said, "What's wrong with you?" And so I told him, and then he knew I was celebrating, and then the dog wanted to go outside. And I said, okay, so I took the dog outside. Well, I wasn't ready to stop dancing and celebrating. So I'm going down the road dancing and celebrating, and one of my brand new neighbors walked out the door, and she's looking at me, and she said, what's going on? And I said, oh, I'm celebrating. And she looked at me and she said, oh my God, you're pregnant. I said, excuse me, I'm 65 years old. No, I'm not pregnant. You know, but she saw the glow. And that's what she said to me. She said, well, you're just glowing. And I knew that day that I was very, very proud. I was very proud of myself, of what I'd accomplished. However, I got to admit, after listening to Dr. Schwartz, I now know how much further I need to go. Yeah, I thought I was doing well eating Impossible burgers.
Okay.
Yeah, and I thought I was doing okay eating a Beyond Burger. And yeah, she has taught me a lot more today, and so I'm going to consider myself a work in progress. But I'm excited to be on this journey, and I've done enough and come far enough that it's actually turned around my numbers. So I know I'm healthier than I've been in years, many years. So I know this is the right path that I'm on. What I need personally is a support group, a group of like-minded people that want to improve their health over time and support each other. Because it's wonderful to learn together and explore together and share some of your failures, share some of your successes. So I am very excited to be part of this community with Chef Paulette. She's made a huge difference in my life in teaching me to cook. I am not a cook. I've never called myself a cook. You know, that's not my forte. I love to garden. I can grow just about anything, but cooking is not my forte. So she has really helped me a lot there, and I appreciate everything. And I want to be part of it and giving back. So I have volunteered to become a volunteer to help with Diabetes Undone, the CHIP program that's upcoming, and any other way that I can be used.
No, that's awesome. Bruce, kind of same kind of question. What kind of made you think that you wanted to rethink about your life and make some changes?
Well, it was interesting that looking back on it, I asked myself, how did I get overweight to start with? And I kept saying, well, I'm going to go up the next pant size and the exercise and I'll come down. Well, I kept saying that, and then finally I said, yeah, this is different, not the way to do it. And my doctor had said, well, that we needed to, like Patsy said, needed to start looking at some numbers and everything. And the CHIP program came along, and my wife went along with me because she said, well, I'll go and help support you, not realizing that there was going to be a lifestyle change that we are still carrying on. And one of the neat things about it is that as you reduce the salt and things in your diet, how much more flavor the food seems to have. You can distinguish the differences in the flavors. We just recently started doing a 15 bean combination, and I could not believe the flavor that has. So much variety just in beans. And I helped out with went through the CHIP program, and then they asked me to help out with the CHIP program, and they've asked me to help out with the Diabetes Undone, and it's my way of giving back. I've gone from a 54-inch waist down to 46 right now.
That's awesome.
And one of the things that I judge how I'm doing is starting out at the Answer Center down at the Arc. I try to get up to the 3rd floor, from the Answer Center to the 3rd floor without stopping. And I did that here just about a month ago.
That's awesome.
And it's about the same as walking out to the Hangar 4 at the Air Force Museum. And overall, I feel better. And you can tell when I eat more with it has a lot more oil and everything in it. It just slows the transit time right down. You feel kind of groggy and everything.
No, that's an awesome result. Can you share something that really worked well for you, like actually like a tip for the audience, and something that you tried and failed that didn't make a difference for you?
Well, I'm a great cheese lover, or was a great cheese lover, and that has been something hard to get away from. Even a lot of the vegan cheeses aren't the best. You know, so, there's an egg dish that I make that's made with just egg, but I've gone, instead of putting like a egg McMuffin and putting a whole slice of cheese on there, I just cut the one slice up into little squares and just sprinkle it a little bit here and there in it. It gives it the cheese flavor, but it doesn't have that much cheese in it. And one slice of that can last for about 6 or 8 egg McPitas.
Okay, so you're decreasing your exposure to that kind of food. Okay.
And that was one of the things that you taught us in the Diabetes Undone class. Because as we went through the course, I thought, how am I ever going to do this? You know, how am I ever going to succeed at this? And you said, make that part of your life 90% of the time, and then give yourself a break 10% of the time. And just like you're talking about cutting down drastically on the amount of cheese, but having just a little bit, you know, of it. And that made all the difference in the world to me, because I didn't feel guilty if I, you know, cheated a little bit and had a little bit. But that Beyond Burger might be a little bit more than the 10%.
Okay.
So.
One of the things that has become one of my favorite breakfasts, I heat water up, a cup of water up in about 3 minutes in the microwave, and then I just add the oats. And I add a quarter cup of old-fashioned oats and then a quarter cup of the steel-cut oats. And then I put dates and raisins, nutritional yeast in it, and fruit if it's in season, a banana or something like that, and I add. I can't think of the name. It's not chia seeds. It's the
Flaxseed?
flaxseed, right? I add flaxseed to it, which is also good for your blood pressure. And I don't need to add salt, and it is delicious. I look forward to eating that. And oats is one of the Teflon of the bloodstream. Dr. Etchelson talks about that from the Cleveland Clinic.
So, Bruce, I know you love to cook because I've actually watched you cook. I've eaten your food, which I really like. Changing your diet, did that make you enjoy cooking less or more, or what impact did that have?
One thing is, my wife and I have gotten to the place where we simplified our diet. You don't need to have the big, supposedly variety of, you got to have an entree, and you got to have a salad, and you got to have this. If you combine everything into a dish, it is so much simpler, and you can whip it out in no time. One thing with cutting down the oil, I've noticed that it's a lot easier to clean your pots and pans, and
Yeah. So Patsy, you mentioned that you really looked for and like kind of that social connectivity. Is there something else that really helped you make this change?
Say that again, social activity.
Yeah, well, you look for kind of the social interaction, but is there something else that you found that was really helpful for you to make the lifestyle change?
Part of it is my experience as a nurse, okay? And I see the patients that I see. I'm a home health care nurse. So I see the struggles that my patients have had, and I want to be able to help them more, which kind of spurs me on to learn more so that I can, in turn, help them. Now, I do have to say, though, like Bruce, you have the advantage of a wife that follows, the same path with you. I don't.
Wait, the wife follows Bruce? That's amazing. Okay, sorry.
No, but she's gone along on this journey, with the food and the diet and stuff. And I live with a man, a very, very dear man, but he, eats all the wrong way and just doesn't show interest in wanting to change. And that is really hard for, someone living in the same house with such variant, or even if we go out to dinner or something. That's hard. So some of us need that additional support outside of the home, for this.
No, I think that makes total sense. Yes.
One thing that keeps coming up in each of the CHIP classes or diabetes and done, what do you do when you travel? And what Kathy and I have done is we now have our instant oatmeal and a lot of the same ingredients that we take along with us. So if that's not available. Another thing that we have done is got a case of Adam and Eve juices at Costco. And by the time the juice is done, what we do is we pour our smoothies into it. And which is a lot better than what was in there originally. And Kathy and I have both had to have some dental work done lately, and she's not able to chew her greens. And so what I did is I combined all the greens. I put carrots and celery and Swiss chard, spinach, bok choy, onions, and all steamed that, and then blended it all up and poured that in there, and it's a green drink. And a lot of times I'll drink one, and I want another one of those, and it's really good. And you haven't done away with the fiber, and you still have all the nutrition there.
No, that's a great traveling. I think is one of the really hard things to stay on your diet. Because of time, we're going to have to move on. I want to thank you both for being here. But one last question each: is there something that you think the audience should know just about the struggles, the journey, and how to kind of get through this kind of change in their life? Anyone want to go first?
I would say continue to educate yourself and to try to find like-minded people, and just spur back and forth, of things that you've learned. And be patient, because everybody doesn't make the change as rapidly as the next guy. Like I said a year ago, when I took the courses, and some of the people, their numbers changed, pretty significantly right away. And I thought, well, I have failed at this, but you really helped me. The 10% thing was huge. Mentally, the 10% thing was huge. That I didn't have to be perfect, but just continue to take baby steps in the right direction. And eventually, you will see the result of that. So I would say, have a support group, educate yourself as much as you can, and have the patience to wait for the results that you're looking for.
That's great. Bruce?
Well, one of the things that I like to do is I like to get a hold of a recipe and see how I can change it to make it more healthy. And I'll text Paulette and say, hey, I've tried this way, and it is really interesting going forward, trying to do things differently, but doing it in a more healthy way.
No, make it fun. That sounds great. We're going to end this part of it, but also on a plug, Bruce will actually be one of our cooks demoing some food. You get to see it, I get to taste it, so I'm happy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, both of you.
I don't know about you, but I'm having a good time.
Yeah, wasn't that encouraging, hearing those life-changing stories?
A lot of good information.
Yeah.
So it's time for our first door prize.
And the door prize winner is going to get a free year subscription to this magazine, Vibrant Life. It's full of all kinds of health tips. It even has recipes in the back. And Paulette's going to announce our winner.
Yes, and so I've looked at the names on Zoom, and we chose one, Susan Maple. So Susan, you'll be getting a free subscription to Vibrant Life.
Congratulations.
So now we're going to transfer with a little video here, and the next thing you're going to see is some cooks.
Thank you.
Food. I love food. I love eating. I'm sure you do. That's why you're at this program, to learn how to eat better, but still eat healthy. One of the big things we've learned with kids, and let's face it, with ourselves, it's got to taste good or it's a non-starter. Okay? There are some things that are really healthy for you that taste terrible. It's not worth it. It's not going to happen for you. All right? So let's not go there. But we also have to think realistically. Food is fuel. And what are we putting into our tanks? Like, you have a nice car, are you gonna put garbage gasoline in your car? If you have a bad car, probably. But if you have a nice car, you're gonna put higher octane, better quality fuel, because you want the car to run better and last longer. And that's the same idea of nutrition and food. We don't put good stuff in ourselves so we run better and that we live longer. Food is probably the most important health lifestyle choice we can make. It's foundational. A lot of people say, like, I can eat whatever I want. I'm just going to exercise it off. You can't do that. Suppose you eat a medium-sized packet of McDonald's fries. That's going to be about an hour, 20 minutes in the pool to burn that off to get back to zero. A can of Coke is about 150 calories. For most people, that's going to be 30 minutes on the treadmill to get back to zero. We're all too busy to try to be burning off these excess calories to just get back to zero. It's not going to work for us. Also, lots of food, especially these high glycemic index, really sugary foods, spike our sugar, then insulin comes, drops our sugar, and then we crash and burn. Who wants to ride that sugar roller coaster and be hyper incapacitated? All right, that's not a good way to go through your day. Now, one of the interesting things is, do you guys know what SAD means? SAD? It's actually a real medical acronym. It means Standard American Diet. And that's a really sad statement. Now, over 60% of the SAD standard American diet is what we call hyper-processed food. It used to be a plant, went through a couple machines, now it's packaged in a can or a box or a bag for your enjoyment. That's probably the worst food to eat. Let me give you an example. Corn on the cob tastes great. Next best thing, corn in a can. Next best thing, after a couple machines get to it, corn syrup, which they inject into everything as a sweetener. You want to find something natural, mildly processed by machine, off the cob, to something that's actually really bad for you. And that happens to a lot of the foods. So what we talk about nowadays is a concept called whole foods plant-based. And what that means is as natural as we can get it, and it's a whole food, non-processed type of fuel for our bodies. And that's the best way to go. Now, does it work? It does. There's actually been really good studies that when you go fully vegan, in 2 weeks, you can cut your cholesterol level in half, and that was just as effective as taking Mevacor, which is a generic statin medication. I know a lot of people don't want to take statins, don't want to get on them. You don't have to. You can just go totally plant-based and really, really push down your cholesterol. Same thing with salt. Most processed foods, salt's a preservative. It's also a flavor enhancer to make you want to go back and buy that again. If you cut back on the processed food, decrease salt, decrease your blood pressure. Also sugar. One of the big things is people's concerns of carbs. There's good carbs and there's bad carbs. The bad carbs are the more refined sugars that you find in snacks, desserts, danishes and pastries, and most in things like soda and juice. If we can eliminate those carbs, those bad sugars, our weight will come down, our sugars will come down, and that can have a big impact on diabetes, cholesterol, and your weight. So once again, think about what are you going to put in your body, what are you going to use as fuel, and pick the best, highest quality stuff to put in your body because you only have one body. All right, don't beat it up from the inside out.
All right, we have just transferred from the sanctuary into the kitchen. This is Tubal and his daughter Maya, and they're going to be making yummy tofu fried rice recipe. I am really looking forward to this.
Hello, everyone. Now, from my left to my right, I will be going in order, adding ingredients. First, we will marinate the tofu. You remember looking at that camera. And so you can ask questions as we go along, but I'm a person, I like to be quiet when I'm cooking. I just like to just go ahead and get it done. But let's get started. So first what I'll do, I'll heat the pan. I have here a wok. And while I'm heating that pan, make sure it doesn't overheat, then I will start to season or marinate the tofu. We'll pour it into a bowl. Thank you, Mai. We'll add a little Bragg's, and the recipe will be posted. Oh, look at that. That's going up already. And the Bragg's is such a great thing. And keep in mind, this tofu, you want to prepare it the night before. So you want to drain the tofu when you buy it from the store. Make sure you get the firm tofu, by the way. Drain it and wrap it in a towel. That way you can dry out all the liquids. That's key to getting a good tofu. And this is steaming, smoking there for a little, so we'll turn that down a bit. All right, so after my Bragg's, I like Lori's. And before, Lori's used to have the MSG in it. Now it doesn't. You could get the sea salt Lori's, and it's actually great. Because tofu is just one of those foods that you know if you don't season it right, it's just going to be bland. you know, well, those who cook with tofu. So I like to pre-season it before I cook it and just kind of marinate it. That way we get a good taste out of it. All right, so we got the Lorries, and this one is optional. You can use a little baking soda. The baking soda is really just there as a rising agent because we're going to fry the tofu crisp. You know, so actually you don't have to use that. So I'm not even going to use the baking soda. This one now is optional. And I would say use your favorite all-purpose seasoning at home. This one I like. I don't have the container it was in, but this one is called Sazon. And it's an all-purpose, but it's a tropical all-purpose seasoning. I love it. I believe Kroger or Walmart has that. So you sprinkle that in. And what I like about the Sazon is that it gives that nice color as you will be frying as well. It has that turmeric in it. And you know when you start to fry it, it will give you that nice golden color. So that one is called Sazon. Or you just use whatever your favorite seasoning at home. All right, so after that's all done, this is my marinade, I am going to add some cornstarch. The cornstarch, what that does is it acts as agent that will help to crisp the tofu as you're frying it. So it can be nice and crispy. So we toss that. Oops, one got away. All right, so we're going to get that heat going back up now.
And I'm going to remind those people that are on Zoom or any other, they will take your questions, whether you have them for tubal or a cooking question. We'll be happy to answer those.
I'm getting an error on this, Paulette. I'm not sure.
If you lift the pan, you'll get an error.
No.
Okay, turn it off.
It says it's hot.
Maybe too hot.
Maybe it's too hot. Well,
Yep. Go ahead and throw your stuff in there, I think. Just like at home.
yes,
We
yes.
have challenges.
Let me unplug and then we'll plug it back and see. This is it right here. All right, let me try that.
Oh, we got it.
Oh, you
now.
got it? Okay.
Yep, I think it
All right,
just
try
got
that.
too hot.
Bear with us, folks. We'll get through this.
Nope, we still have an error. It jumped. Let's pull yours out.
Yep, let's get one. Let's get. All right, let's pull that. Maya, pull that. Yeah. So we have a backup just in case.
Yep.
And you can leave that right here if you want. All right. Okay, so let me see, what else can I say to you while we're waiting for that to heat up? We got the tofu marinated. We have the brags in it. And
Can you tell us something, difference between the wet pack and the morning type of?
The different kinds of tofu.
the different kinds of tofu. So, of course, you know, the tofu comes in liquid, it's wet. It depends on the type of dish you're making. Because some dishes, you want that tofu to be moist and wet. But if you're going to be frying and you want that crisp, then of course you want to get that moisture and liquid out of that. So the key thing is wrapping it in a paper towel or rag, and letting that, you can let that sit for 5 hours. I just normally do it overnight. And for this dish as well, you want to make sure you have your rice cooked the day before. Put it in a refrigerator. it's not great to do stir fry with just freshly cooked rice. You want that to be in the refrigerator. I use the Uncle Ben's because it's shelly and it's grainy. All right, there we go. So we're gonna, while I talk, let's get this thing. So as you can see, that beautiful color, that's just there from the seasoning. So you really want a high heat, and we're just having some technical difficulties with our equipment. This is an induction cooktop. If we had just a regular conventional cooktop, then at least the heat will be consistent. But with this, we'll do with the best what we have. You can add, oh, thank you. You want to go this way? Okay. As you go, you may see the need to add coconut oil. I am using coconut oil, even though Dr. Storch just mentioned about coconut oil that it's best to use the vegetable oil source. So we'll try to get this all crisp. And as we try to get this all crisp, next in line, you want to do this in segments. So you do your tofu, then you do your vegetables, then you do your rice. Then at the end, you combine it all together. And that will be a good way of just kind of building this dish. Any questions as I wait for this tofu to crisp? Yes and no. I mean, of course, it's really just building and making the stir-fry rice, and you pick up things here and there as you go along. So I don't take full credit for everything, but for the most part, yes. Yes, cornstarch is a nice way that if you want to, and generally we use that with chicken, or if you're doing anything like that. So cornstarch is a nice way of crisping, and of course it's a thickening agent as well, as you know it to be. But it's also good to give a nice crisp. And you don't have to use cornstarch. You can also use just some flour to do that as well, and that will give you the same effect. Cornstarch is just a little lighter. We'll give this just 1 minute. And I don't know if you can see, but it's getting there. It just gives that wonderful brown, golden color. And it's almost, I say, you cannot mess up. You know, you may think you can. You cannot mess up, because if you're cooking in the kitchen and you just love what you're doing, then you just make it work. You know, you may add a little more of this or less of this. You just have to have fun with what you're doing. Okay, you got the bowl there for this. I think we'll call this right now. All right, so here we go. First stage is done. We will empty out the... All right. Next, we'll add just a half a tablespoon or so of oil again. Now we're going to start on the veggies. I have here red onions, ginger, garlic. Oh, it's just so much fun to cook with the fresh ginger and the fresh garlic. Oh, I just love it, the aroma. You get that aroma before it even goes on the stove. All right, so we'll start with the onions first. Reason, let me have a spoon. You want to get the onions translucent and cooked first, then add the garlic and ginger after, because it takes a little longer for the onions to really get a little cooked down. And you don't have to have a wok to do this, actually. I love cooking in my big cast iron pot, so you don't need a wok to do this. This wok, I just got it, so I'm seasoning this wok, and that's a whole nother story of how you season your pans to give it that non-stick ability. All right, so onions are in. So now let's add some ginger and garlic. Yes. Oh. Just stand back from the, okay, here we go. Is that better? Okay. I think we're getting the gist of it. And again, you have to be flexible. So if you see you need more oil, it's best to start off with less oil or less of anything you're doing and just add as needed. So I'm just adding a little more oil to it because now I'm ready to add my other vegetables. Now these vegetables, as you can see, just for television, I got them frozen. And this is with the peas and the carrots and the corn. The next best thing to doing it fresh and dicing it yourself, I believe that the frozen one is best versus using canned. So we'll bring that down to a cook. Now as we're doing this, this is where I like to add in some sesame. I love sesame oil. Just that aroma that it gives. So we'll add a little bit of sesame in there. And of course the recipe will be posted. And also another great thing to remember is, as you're doing this, keep it moving. Because if you let the food just sit, it will tend to maybe stick at the bottom or burn. So it's best to keep the heat on it, medium to high heat, and just keep it moving. That way, we'll get it evenly cooked and it won't burn or stick. And because I use on the front end the amino acids and the Lorry sea salt seasoning, I don't want to add any more salt to it. I could say you could season to taste. So the only time if you feel that you need to season it anymore is when the dish is done and you could taste it then and be like, okay, I need a little more salt or, but from what Dr. Schwartz just mentioned and Dr. Harvey, we want to keep the sodium usage to a minimum. So if you can use less sodium in your diet, so much better for you, Okay, so we're going to go through. All right, Maya, let me please have a container to put the veggies in. All right, thank you. So we're done with the veggies, done with the tofu. Now we want to go on to the rice. And with the rice, you don't need really any oil. Whatever residue is in the wok or pan, pretty much we just want to reheat the rice anyway because it's already cooked. And you see how this rice is grainy? That gives you a better stir fry because you don't have to deal with the sticky rice and trying to separate it. So you want to keep it grainy. So We like to eat the jasmine rice at home, but that's not for this, I believe, because that's a little more, sticky. So for this one, I use the Uncle Ben's rice, or you can use the parboiled rice, and that will give you this grainy consistency. And also, speaking of the Bragg's amino acid, we use it for salt, but also I love Bragg's for the reason it's good for the salt substitute as well. We use that a lot for it, but also the color. So being that we're not going to be using soy sauce or a Worcestershire sauce or whatever other sauce it is, this is a good sauce that will give you the same effect. It gives you that nice darkened color to the rice, and you're not going to miss the soy sauce, because soy sauce is packed with a lot of sodium. I wish I had a little more to add to that, but that's fine. Okay, so there are some low sodium soy sauce. So we just got some very good information that there's soy sauce has about 900 milligrams of sodium, and this Bragg's amino has about 300. Again, keep it moving. Let me back up from the... So this is the fun part. It's... Also, I have one that's prepared for you, so you can add things to this. Don't feel you have to stick to a recipe. Of course, if you want to start off with the original recipe, but go ahead and tweak it to what you like. This you could add eggs to it if you want to. You could, but really me using the tofu, that really can take the place of your eggs. And there's different ways that you can do that tofu if you really mash it. You can make it to look like that scrambled eggs anyway. So you can use that tofu as an egg substitute. So today for you I have both. I will have the total vegan, and then I'll have the one that has egg in it as well. All right, so now rice is all done. Let's go ahead and add everything together. I'm sorry. Oh, sure. Good. Okay. All right, so here we go. So first, add into this rice. Let's go ahead and add the veggies to this rice. Thank you, Maya. As you can see, once the rice is done, you leave the rice in the pot or the wok, because now we're just going to be incorporating all of our ingredients into it. Oh, you see how that's looking yummy already? I'm sorry? Yeah, you could use the parboiled rice. It just makes the rice grainier. It's not going to be the sticky rice. All right, so we have the veggies added. Let's go ahead and add the tofu now. And look at that color of the tofu. All right, so after all has been incorporated, this is that time that you can now get your tasting spoon out and you can taste it. You could add, to it your seasoning, your salt. You could add some pepper if you eat that. You can add more Bragg's amino acid, you know, if you want more of that taste. Pretty much everything is done. What I like to do is at the end, I have the green onions, the scallions. You could add some of that. Maybe about a couple tablespoons. Actually, that's 2 chopped. So you can add 1 chopped onion to your dish. All right, let me have it plated. And then save the other one for when you're done, just to really add that garnish to the top. So we're going to plate this for you right now. Oh, that looks so good. Let's put some of that tofu on the top. I think we're okay there. All right, let's put this off to the side.
All right, any questions?
And we'll just add as garnishment your green onions to the top. Get you an extra crunch. And also, this is good. I brought this just as something nice. You could add some cayenne pepper. You know how healthy that is for you. You know, so you could just sprinkle a little cayenne pepper on the top. It's good for the garnishment and gives a little kick. All right. Thank you. Thank you to Maya, who is my able assistant as well. Any questions?
Any questions? I think we answered them.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Tubal. Thank
You're
you, Maya.
welcome. Thank you.
Yep.
Let's
Looks good, smells good, is good.
let's put everything on this cart.
Hi, I'm going to be talking about water. Water is really important. Water is everywhere. About 70% of the earth is covered by water. 60% of our own body is made up of water. 90% of our blood's water, but very interestingly, inside your head, inside your noggin, 85% of your brain is composed of water. Now, water is really important. If you don't have enough water, you get dehydrated. When you're dehydrated, you can actually get dizzy, lightheaded, or weak, even faint. Common cause. Another problem is if your brain's dehydrated and it's 85% water, you can actually get headaches, and no one likes to get headaches. Also, you get muscle cramps when you're dehydrated. Now, even if you don't get a muscle cramp, being dehydrated can adversely affect your sports performance. So who wants to exercise, train, only to show up to the big game and perform worse than you thought you would because you didn't drink enough water? Drinking water is easy to do. It's everywhere. Now, that's not totally true. It's easy to do here in America. But there's lots of countries around the world, lots of places that do not have access to clean water. We never even think about that. We have problems like our Wi-Fi signal is weak, our latte isn't made right, but there's kids who don't have enough clean water to drink. Now, if you're interested in kind of reversing that problem here, think about donating to rippleeffect.org. That's a local charity whose mission is to deliver water pumps and water filters to places around the world to help these kids and these families to have clean water to drink. I mean, that's like a basic fundamental need of life. So really think about it. Now, what talk on health right now in 2020 would not be complete without talking about COVID-19. All right, so as an example here, I'm going to use barbecue potato chips. Okay, pretend these are viruses. All right, at work, I sanitize my hands before and after every patient encounter. After a couple of encounters though, there's like a film of sanitizer on my hands. I have to go wash with water and soap. That's what we need to do. Washing our hands is the best way to get rid of the virus. Here's a great example. COVID on my hands. Hand sanitizer. 2 pumps. Oh my, I'm making a huge mess in my own kitchen. Okay, what has happened? It's actually made it worse. It's actually now coated and stuck to my hand, underneath my fingernails, all over the places.
what we need to do to get rid of the virus and anything else that's nasty stuck to our hands is wash it off with good old-fashioned soap and water. All right, everyone stay healthy out there.
We're busy setting up for the next cooking demo. Before that, though, we're going to be doing another door prize. So Paulette is about to pick another lucky winner, and this time the door prize is a $50 gift card to Dorothy Lane Market, if you're local.
Yep, and this is for Ruth Mosier.
Ruth Mosier, congratulations on your door prize. And now we're going to take it away to Bruce. Here you go, Bruce.
Bruce, as he talked about earlier, is started in the CHIP program, has done Diabetes Undone, and has helped me with a number of classes, cooking and just helping out in the kitchen. And he's just so fantastic, and he is a chef. And his very able assistant is his wife, Kathy, and we're just excited that they're both here.
Well, one of the recipes I ran across recently was a fresh tomato pie recipe. And I mentioned it to my wife, and she said, no, that doesn't sound good at all. But I had to try it, and we liked it, but we decided that, this might make a nice pizza recipe. And so we modified the recipe, cut out about 2/3 of the...
We need to switch.
Okay.
We got another technical challenge.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, as I was saying, well, this was a tomato pie recipe that I discovered, and I wasn't, my wife wasn't that crazy about the idea of a tomato pie, and but then we tried it as a pie, and it was good. But then we said, this would make a great pizza recipe, and so we modified the recipe and brought it down to about 2/3 less salt than what the original recipe called for. And you can use this with fresh tomatoes, or you can use it with what we have now is little cherry tomatoes. And what we did is run this through the food processor and cut them super fine, thin. It's a real simple recipe. And we start out with Engine 2 Plant Strong pizza crust that you get at Whole Foods, and it's by Ethelstein's son. So let's get started. You weigh a lot of your foods. You can say, okay, how much is a cup? Well, a cup of small carrots or big carrots or tomatoes. You say, well, what is a cup? Well, once you figure it out, weigh it, and then after all you have to do is weigh it, and you don't have to try measuring it out. I use about a pound of thinly sliced large tomatoes, or I use the smaller tomatoes. This is about 10 ounces of the smaller tomatoes. Now this is vegan mayonnaise, and you just need less than 1/4 cup. Basically, you just tap it. You don't need to really put that much on. Just so the flavoring is spread around. We tried this first by putting it in the order of the original recipe, and that's putting the garlic on first, but then when you put the mayonnaise on, well, you sort of move the garlic around. So the original recipe called for whole minced garlic. And we decided that we'd like to try it with the granulated garlic. So what you have is 3/4 of a teaspoon of granulated garlic and 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and you mix them together. Now, a handy device is a grapefruit spoon. I don't know, can we get a close-up with this, switch to this camera? You see the edges there? So when you go to mix up your salt mixture, what it does is it nicely spreads it right all over evenly. Emerald, I used to watch his cooking show some, and what he would say was, it's too bad you guys didn't have smell-o-vision, because things really begin to start smelling good around here. Now you can add fresh basil. Now, a handy little tool. If you're around me along, you'll learn that I'm a gadget person. And if you could get another close-up of this. See, it's a three-bladed scissors. And what you do is you come along and you can, go ahead back over to the overhead. Yeah, am I in or not? Now I am. You can just come along here and take your freshly done basil, washed and dried, and it just cuts it up in these nice little strips. This particular tool comes with, I'll go back to the overhead, comes with, move just a little bit so I can see, yeah, there we go. This, and you can go down here and then just clean out the in between the blades. Now, out of season, one thing about basil before we move on is that it is not a refrigerated item. You put it in the refrigerator, it's going to turn a lot faster than if you leave it at room temperature. Turn brown. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do half of this in basil fresh and half in dry basil, so let's say it's out of season. I don't know if you've had basil on tomato sandwiches before, but that is delicious. And the other day we were mixing up the greens like I was talking about earlier, and I said, well, we have this fresh basil here. Let me just throw a couple of those basil leaves in there. And we did that, and it was really good. Now here's the dry. So I'm just sprinkling it on there. I tend to do the basil a little bit thicker than I do the fresh basil, because it doesn't seem to have as much intense flavor as the fresh basil does. Now, the two cheeses I use shredded Viola Life cheddar and mozzarella. All right. But the thing is, we found out the less cheese you put on it, the better tasting it is. So we just sprinkle it on lightly. We tried it the way we used to make normal pizzas, and really just really load it up with the cheese, and it wasn't as good. Okay, now through the magic time lapse, let's bring that other out as we go to put this other in the oven. Yeah, the plate. And let's go overhead. Okay, can you see that? That piece is there with the basil, and this part is with the dried. It is my wife's favorite pizza. She says, I don't want anything else. I've demonstrated it a number of times at the class, and people keep coming back for seconds. It's really pretty good. And this is another tool, talking about tools. I have found it's a pizza cutter. I use it for chopping vegetables even, because it rocks real good if you got a big pile of vegetables you want to chop. It's great for cutting pizzas. And that brings us to the end of that recipe. Any questions on the pizza recipe? What I do is I preheat the cut crust about 3 minutes to get it a little crisp. You want to make sure you drain the tomatoes. Okay. And some of the tomatoes are juicier than others. And so I preheat it so the crust is a little dry, so it will absorb some more of that a little bit better. Then the other thing, once you put it in, you just want it so the crust starts to brown and the cheese just starts to melt. So it's about 5 minutes or less.
All right, I'm going to share your mic with you. He's going to set up. We're going to do
Mango balls.
the mango balls.
How I came across this recipe, and I gave credit on it, that as I just said, I'm a gadget person. And if you have a Vitamix, it is one of the smart Vitamixes that will communicate with your telephone by Bluetooth or whatever. It will take the new food processor that they've come up with. So I had this along here just to show you. This is a Vitamix, and we're just about to convert it to a food processor. Now, can we get it down? There's that blade in there. You've got a variety of blades that thicknesses. And it's a handy storage compartment. You just put it in here and put it on the bottom of the machine when you go to store it. And then you just stick it on top here. But we're not going to be using this part, so I'm going to take it off. Turning this around, and then we'll put it up here. Now, unlike your regular Vitamix, it will only have one speed once you go to turn it on. Here is the scale. The big question is the recipe calls for 1 cup of dried mangoes. Overhead there, yeah. So how much, when you get mangoes like this, how much is a cup? So what I did was I took my shears and cut it into small pieces till I got about a cup, weighed it, and came up that it's about 4.5 ounces. So that's where the scale comes in real handy. So next time you got a handful of this, what makes it a cup of mangoes? I have tried this with a lot of the ones in the stores have added sugar to them, but Trader Joe's has the unsugared, unsulfured ones, and they are just as good, if not better. The ingredients is really simple. We have 5 ingredients. We have the mangoes, and we have 10 dates. There's my chopped mangoes that I cut in smaller pieces because the blades work a little bit better. Then you have the cashews. I take that and I cover it with water and take it in the microwave for about 2 minutes to soften it up. and then I drain it. And here's my chia seeds, and I put the salt in with that this time, so it's not going to be measured separately. First off, you put your dates, your mangoes and dates in. One thing, if you get one of these, you need to make sure everything's down tight. Otherwise, it will not go. Working at this backwards. And you want to just pulse it. It's getting there. I'll take this off. Can we get a down shot at? Now what you're going to do is you're going to add the rest of the ingredients, and when it starts pulling away from the sides, it's ready to make into balls. It's really a simple recipe. Starting to pull away. I have found that you put it in a bowl like this, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to take your scoop and what I use is a little I guess it's cookie type of server where you get out proportions, and it's got the little lever. And we take it, and then, Kathy, you have a plate there that I could. Oh, here, I'll get one here. And you just put these into balls, and miraculously, through, gives you about 30 of those. And they're delicious. Okay, any questions on that? Yes?
How do you store it?
Store it? Well, usually it doesn't stay around that long. But what we do is when I get through with them, I put them in the freezer immediately on a tray. And once they've sort of sat for a while and cooled off, then I take them out and you can leave them at room temperature. If they were really sticky, one of the suggestions is that you add coconut or roll them in nuts or something like that, a nut crumb or something like that.
All right. I think I better check this out. For you guys online, you're missing it. We'll be
Exercise. Exercise is actually the most effective and probably least used method to increase your energy, enhance your mood, actually help you sleep and lose weight. Why don't we do more of it? There's a strange disconnect. When we're all kids, we played games and played sports, and when we become adults, we don't do anything. We watch sports. The total change. Why did that happen? Things that used to be fun become less fun and become so unfun, we don't want to do it again. We get injured, we feel tired, there's too much prep for it. All those things are barriers to exercise. Probably the biggest barrier is we call it exercise. The reason we did all this stuff when we were a kid, because it was fun, and you know what we called it? We called it play. We need to get back to the point where we play. If you can't play, then at least train for something. It's actually really good to have a goal, like I want to go from couch to 5K, I want to run a half marathon, I want to be able to hike this 15-mile trail at Glacier National Park. All these things will help motivate you to keep working out because you're training for something. Worst case scenario, you can exercise. But on the baseline, all you have to really do is get active. The data is really interesting. If you walk for 15 consecutive minutes every day, that decreases your chance of dying from any cause, especially heart disease, just 15 minutes. Now, the recommendation is to get 30 minutes a day. Does anyone know what percentage commitment that is to your day? 30 minutes per day is about 3% of your waking hours. I think you're worth 3% effort in this area. Now, the funny thing is everyone thinks they're very active. Like at work, I run around, I'm always on my feet. But what happens is you walk for 2 minutes, bother your friend, walk for 3 minutes, get a cup of coffee, walk for another 2 minutes and sit down. It needs to be at least 15 minutes continuous. All right. Now, it was really funny. There's a study called the Norwegian Activity Study where they gave every participant 2 things: a journal, so they could write down what they did or thought they did, and then an accelerometer, like a Fitbit, that actually tracked how much they walked, how much they sat, and how much vigorous activity they did. The funny thing is, guys overestimated their amount of exercise by 56 minutes. All right, and that's comparing the journal to the real data. The other thing that was really funny is they said, I do 20 minutes of vigorous activity every day. You know what the data said? 2.9 minutes. That's really bad. The other thing that was interesting is they underestimated how much they sat down, that they were sedentary, by 2 hours. Now, that brings up another point. Sitting is bad for you. 1 hour of sitting down and watching a movie or even sitting in your car is associated with losing 21 minutes on the back end of your life. Think about that. In comparison, people that chronically, consistently jog, they add about 7 years to their life. So you can do nothing and die quicker, or you can do something and actually live longer. One of my partners likes to make a joke that he thinks that everyone's got only a certain number of heartbeats, so he's going to save his by not exercising. The funny thing is, the more you exercise, the lower your heart rate gets. So you're actually saving heartbeats if you exercise. So I think the big thing to remember here is just get active by just walking around more. Actually helps you lose weight, makes you live longer. If you can, play a game. Tennis, pickleball is great. Basketball, whatever floats your boat, do it. All right. Now, if you can't really find an organized sport you like, then exercise, then train for something. Train for a 5K, a half marathon. Train for a big hike you're going to go on. Train for a long bike ride you want to go with your friends. And it doesn't have to be ridiculous goals like I want to do a 100-mile bike ride. It can be like, hey, I want to eventually get up to doing a 25-mile bike ride with my friends. That's a good goal to shoot for. It'll help keep you motivated. And if you can't do any of those, there's nothing wrong with exercising. Lifting weights, jogging, running, riding a bike, going to the gym. If you like that, then you're all set. But the most important thing is do something.
Welcome back to the kitchen. Natalie's here with some yummy looking pancakes. Tell me about what you do and what your background is.
Well, I, about a couple of years ago, finished my doctorate of public health with a focus in nutrition. And I'm also a registered dietitian. And I got the recipe that I'm going to share with you guys from my sister, who's also a registered dietitian, So this is going to be nutrition-packed pancakes, and we love them. We have them almost daily at my house.
And I brought her cookbook along, so before you're finished, we'll show the audience her cookbook.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so these pancakes are literally named the best banana pancakes you will ever have. They are very healthy, and they have oats, almond flour, regular flour, flaxseed, meal, bananas, of course, and lemon, salt, cinnamon, baking soda, and baking powder. And I'm just going to real quick grab my phone to actually read the recipe. There should be a recipe page for you guys to see and take it down. That will be online.
Is your phone?
All right, so the first thing we're going to do is, this will work with regular oats or steel-cut oats. And what you're going to do is make an oat flour with the oats first. So this is pre-measured 2 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats. And I'm just going to put those in the blender and make a flour out of that real quick. And so whatever blender you have, as long as it's, it doesn't have to be an extremely powerful blender. If it isn't very powerful, you'll have to blend this on and off until you get a nice flour feel. Oh, yeah. So until you get a nice flour feel for those oats. Now I'm going to just start dumping everything into the blender. But if you don't have a big enough blender for this recipe, then make your oat flour first, put it aside, mix all the dry ingredients in a big bowl, and then have your wet ingredients in the blender, blend those up, and then combine everything together. But fortunately, I have a big enough blender. Thanks to my husband, he's like, it has horsepower, so we bought it. And I'm just going to dump everything into here. So we have 2 cups of regular oats that have been blended into a powder. And right now I am going to add half a cup of almond flour, and you can find this pretty much anywhere nowadays in the supermarkets. And I am going to add 1/4 a cup of regular flour. I have actually tried this recipe without the regular flour to make it gluten-free, and it worked out well, so that was nice. I'm going to now add 2 tablespoons of flaxseed meal. The flaxseed meal give fiber, they give the omega oils that are so important. A lot of times, a lot of dietitians often say that you can only get omega fatty acids from animal sources like fatty fish, but you can get it from plant sources like walnuts, flaxseed oil, and several other types of oils. I'm going to add the 1 teaspoon, I believe, of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. You can add an egg to this. The recipe calls for that. I will not be doing that today, and it's practically vegan. So the cinnamon and the egg are optional. And there's 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. I'm going to add 1 cup of plant-based milk. Could be almond milk, soy milk, oat milk for that matter. And I'm also going to add about 1 cup of water. If this starts to run a little thick during your cooking process, you can always add more water because the flaxseed will become like gelatinous and make it a bit thicker. I'm also going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And finally, the 2 very ripe bananas. And this is perfect because if you don't know what to do with extremely ripe bananas, just make these pancakes and they are so yummy. The nice thing about it is that the this recipe doesn't, although it calls for bananas, they're not overpowering. So it's yummy. In fact, we had this for breakfast today, and I just had a friend come over, and we went for a walk, and she had some pancakes because they're freshly made batch. So I'm just going to blend all of this up. All right, and like I said, if you don't have a big enough blender, just do the dry ingredients first, make your flour out of that, and then the wet ingredients and combine them in a bowl. So I like to make my pancakes a little bit smaller than regular pancakes. So I take a 2 tablespoon measuring spoon, and I just make my pancakes that way. So we'll just, I like uniformity. And I was making a batch of this earlier this morning, and my babies woke up, and I just turned it off. And once they were out of their cribs, turned it back on and continued. So this is easy to make, and I'll just make 4 of those right now real quick. And sure. So my sister, who has a PhD in nutrition and is also a registered dietitian, she recently wrote a cookbook, and it is available at Pacific Press, and it's really yummy. And I will tell you, when she was making the recipes for this cookbook, the toughest critics that she could find criticized every single recipe in this cookbook, and that is my parents, particularly my father. He will tell you what he thinks of something very honestly without beating around the bush. And every single recipe has been daddy approved. So it is really good. This recipe of the pancakes is not in the cookbook, so you're in for a treat. And if you missed the recipe or want to share it, oh, we should have had some oil on here. Oh well, no worries. No worries. I have pre-made pancakes, and we'll just pretend to flip them and heat them for taste's sake. And these pancakes, they freeze really well. I took a batch out a couple of days ago to feed. I have twin boys who are a month shy of being 1.5 years old, and they devour these. And you know, babies can be pretty picky, but the pickier eater in my family is actually my husband, and he loves these pancakes. He will put these pancakes on and drizzle peanut butter and maple syrup on it, and he'll just eat them up. And I'm being proud of my babies because right now they are eating 2.5 pancakes each. So I'm like, oh, eat babies, eat. So these pancakes are highly nutritious. They have no sugar added besides the banana, and that gives a lot of sweetness to it. And they have the flaxseed, they have the almonds, oats. Oats are an undermined grain. They actually have the, like if you were to rate grains in terms of protein content, quinoa would come in first, and then oats, and then the whole grains like whole wheat and brown rice come in next for protein content. So it's high in protein, low in sugar, and excellent fats. And what I would do is I would probably drizzle a little bit of coconut oil on the pan and have that incorporated into there, so you can add a little fat into it. And they are delicious. We have them all the time.
So, any questions?
One comment. If you have a coffee maker grinder, if you take your flaxseed and just grind it a bunch of that up ahead of time, about a month's supply, it's real easy to do. You can add it to a lot
Yeah, that's true. I got my flaxseed meal ready milled, but it's actually healthier to get flax seeds whole and mill it yourself. That way the good fats in them don't become oxidized. If you do get the flaxseed meal that's already prepared, be sure to put that in the refrigerator once you open the bag. That keeps the freshness of that.
All right. Any other comments, questions?
Do we have maple syrup?
We do. I brought some maple syrup just in case. All right. So if you're online, sorry, but those of you here in the room can have some pancakes. Okie dokie. We'll be back in just a little bit with our last presenter, Evelyn.
I can't breathe in this thing. I'm going to be talking about air. And that's one of the most important things in life. Without air, we can't live that long. But I'm also going to talk about masks. Do masks work? What's the big fuss about? Why do we care about 6 feet, 14 days quarantine, 15 minutes close contact time, or even masks? Do the viruses stop in 6 feet? Does everyone stop shedding virus in 14 days? What's it with 15 minutes inside a small room? Are these absolutes? Does any mask, even N95, block 100% of the virus coming through? Of course not. All the answers to those questions are no. But why do we advocate for those? There's a simple concept. It's called reducing the viral load. Here's an example. Suppose you're there and you're talking to me, and all of a sudden I go, Joe, would you rather me have this mask on, or would you rather me sneeze and cough all over you? This protects you by giving a simple barrier to a bunch of virus coming at you. All right? It's not going to stop them all, but it's going to cut down the amount that's going to get into you and onto you. Now, the great thing is we all have an immune system. The immune system can then do its job by killing a couple of viruses instead of trying to kill 1 million viruses. So that's why we do this. Try to reduce the viral load, reduce your exposure. Now, there's a simple slogan that goes along with this. And it's, my mask protects you, your mask protects me. All right, and that's a great thing. Now, is there a way, though, that we can avoid wearing masks? Yeah. Go outside. Air is awesome. When you're outside, you get fresh air, sunshine, and if you're walking around in a nature area of trees, there's something called forest bathing. It's actually been shown that when you go walk in a forest, it will lower your cortisol level. Cortisol is a stress hormone that over a long term is not good for you. So you can actually become de-stressed by just taking a nature hike in the fresh air without needing a mask at that time. Hey, but when you go back inside, put your mask on and think about the air that we share.
All right. If I can ask everybody out in the audience, hello out there, and hello to all of you that are online. This is Evelyn. Evelyn, you're still in high school.
I am. I'm a junior in high school this year.
Okay, and homeschooling.
Yes.
Okay, and I know you like to cook. So
Yes, I do.
when did you start cooking?
Well, I was helping my mom in the kitchen since around 3. My job was to taste test everything and critique it. Needless to say, it may have taken a few tries. And any leftovers from my critiques would be lunch for my family. But as I got older, I developed a love for cooking in the kitchen. So I'm here to share with you 2 recipes.
Go for it.
All right, so the first recipe that we have is called vegan chicken Alfredo pasta. The ingredients that you're going to need is cashews, nutritional yeast, soy curls, onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and olive oil, and then water. So we have, for the first step, we have to make our cashew milk. Now this is a little thicker than your typical nut milk on purpose so that the sauce is thicker. If you wanted to skip this step, you can go ahead and get regular nut milk from the store. It may just be a little thinner sauce. So our first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in 1.5 cups of water to our blender. And this works really well if you have a very high-speed blender. If you do not have a high-speed blender, you can use, you should probably soak the cashews first. Then we have 1/4 cup of raw cashew nuts. These are whole cashew nuts. So we're going to put that in there too. And we're just going to go ahead and blend this. So now that this is nice and smooth, we're only going to need a cup of this. The rest of it you can use for gravies, for other sauces. It works perfectly. You can use this as nut milk as well. You may want to add a little more water to thin it out a little bit. So I'll put that in here. And my blender aside. And here we go. So I'm going to put a cup of this into my saucepan here, and I'm going to start warming it up. So I'm going to go temperature. So I have a cup of my cashew milk. And to this I'm going to add 1/2 cup of olive oil. I'm gonna start mixing that. Now, while that is warming up, we're gonna add our 3/4 cup of nutritional yeast. Nutritional yeast is actually very high in B complex, so this is where you would get your B12, for example. Some of them do have B12 added to them, others don't. It's just B complex. So this one is high on B12 that we have. And you can get this at Health Foods Unlimited, for example. You can also get it at Kroger's, I think has it. Trader Joe's is the one that I'm using. So you're going to mix that in really well. Now I'm going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder. You can tweak this to taste. So add that in. And you're just going to stir this on medium-low heat, and it should start to thicken up. Now, soy curls are a good substitute for, I'm using this as a substitute for chicken. You don't have to use this, optional. I like soy curls, so we're going to go ahead and add 1/4 cup of these into our sauce. You can soak these if you wanted to. I've done it both ways, and for me it has worked. So just going to put that in. Mr. Tubal mentioned tofu. That's also another soy product that people use for eggs most of the time.
How often do you guys eat this at home?
We usually make this maybe once a week. My family loves Alfredo pasta, so it's one of our favorites.
What's your favorite breakfast?
Favorite breakfast? My mom makes delicious bean tacos with corn tortillas and avocado and black beans. It's definitely a family favorite.
I think you had that for breakfast this morning.
We
if I
did.
heard your mom, what your dad said.
We did have this for breakfast.
Okay. All right, any questions in the audience? I see you're using pink salt. Tell me why you've chosen pink salt.
Pink Himalayan salt, that's really something my mom buys. Probably has a higher nutritional value.
It does. Yep.
But that's just the one that we've been using.
Yep.
You can really use any salt for this recipe that you have at home.
Okay. Yes, Adeline. Okay, so her question is that it seems as if you have to serve it immediately because it kind of clumps up.
Yeah, it does work better if you serve it immediately. Is it working? It does work better if you serve it immediately. We've had it on, if you mix it with the pasta, gluten-free pasta especially seems to stick a lot. If you do serve it with pasta, with regular pasta, it seems to work okay. Yeah, long periods of time in general don't work. This has olive oil in it, so it shouldn't stick as much. So now my sauce is starting to thicken up.
The beauty of cashews, God made them in such a way that when they're heated like this, they naturally thicken.
Right.
And so it makes an awesome gravy. I use it for a cucumber sauce. Yeah. Potato, that's cream for any kind of soup, but Bruce mentioned potato soup. It's awesome in potato soup. But mushrooms, add mushrooms to that and you have a mushroom soup. It is, yep, very good. Now you can see that it's
starting to thicken up.
Yep.
And it should get to a point where it starts coming off the bottom of the pan.
Yep, you can see that thickening happening here. And those soy curls are reconstituting as you go.
I have done this with regular nut milk, so it did get a little thicker. It still works. It may, to me, if it's thicker, it sticks to the pasta better. So it'll, I think, bring out more of the flavor, so that it's. So yeah, it's getting definitely.
Getting there.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Okay, I'll work on this and you
All
get
right.
set up for your next one because it's almost there.
It is. But really, after you're done with that sauce, we like to add fresh parsley to that. You don't have to, that's optional. It just adds more flavor to the sauce. So I'll leave that there. And our next recipe, I need to get my tray out.
All right, so next recipe is dessert time.
So this is vegan and sugar-free and gluten-free. It's banana chocolate peanut butter ice cream. So at one point we called it Reese's ice cream in our family. It's definitely a favorite. I'm still working on this recipe, so it's not finalized.
Yeah, you said with this recipe you were working on, was it something with nutritional yeast? No.
No. This one I found that if you actually add more peanut butter and cocoa powder, as long as not too much, because this does need to be sweet, as long as you don't add too much, it really brings out the flavor. And once you hit that spot, it's really, really good. So I'm going to go ahead and get my frozen bananas. Now I'm using 4 small frozen bananas, and then I just freeze them in a freezer bag.
What do you think? Have we got it here?
That looks good.
then,
Yeah.
on the pasta,
Not all of it, but
part of it. Yep, go for it.
so Alfredo sauce is done. I'll just serve that over pasta. This is whole wheat pasta. So fettuccine pasta. So we'll
Whole
go
wheat
with that.
fettuccine pasta.
Yes. You can add some parsley. There we go.
All right.
And that can go with the rest.
Looks like supper is being made.
So now for our ice cream, I'm gonna add 4 small frozen bananas. That'll be about 3 large bananas. And these are best if they are really, really ripe because they're the sweetest. So you wanna freeze these. I freeze these overnight. Then to the bananas, you're gonna add 2 to 3 tablespoons of 100% pure cocoa powder. You could do carrot powder if you didn't want the cocoa. And then we're gonna add, this is pure peanut butter. This is no added sugar. And we're gonna add about a tablespoon. You can add a little more. And then you're going to add 2 teaspoons, depending on how sweet you wanted it, of vanilla extract. And again, this is 100% pure vanilla extract. So. And then to that, we're going to add a dash of salt to bring out the flavors. And then some cinnamon. This is optional, but I think it adds even more flavor to the ice cream. So now we're going to blend that. I'm using a Vitamix, which is a high-speed blender. I'll show you what it looks like if you freeze it after that for 12 hours. It makes a really nice ice cream texture. So this is kind of what it looks like when you can scoop it out after 12 hours of freezing afterwards. And you can serve this with nuts or chocolate chips. I use cocoa nibs, which is 100% pure chocolate. And that's it, you're all set to go.
All right, questions?
Flavors, can you change the flavors with that?
You probably can. The base of this is bananas. We've always liked chocolate. I think we've done regular banana ice cream, and it worked fine.
Okay.
So you can just play around with it.
Okay. We use just bananas and put vanilla and chocolate with it.
Yeah.
Bananas, vanilla, and chocolate, Bruce is telling us, okay?
Did you add any milk to it? Or?
No, no milk. The trick is not to add any added liquid in you need, because when you freeze it, that's what makes it frosty and icy. So when you have the bananas have the perfect texture of softness and creaminess. That's the whole point of adding the bananas. Yeah.
Good question. All right. Dr. Hahn, any more questions? All right. Thank you, Evelyn. This is bringing us to the end. I don't know about you all, but I've had a great time. We've learned all kinds of neat things and seen all kinds of wonderful foods. What do you think, Carrie?
It's been a really great afternoon. Would you agree? So we're about to do our final door prize, and we'd like to pick another winner.
It is Rita Robinson.
All right, Rita, you just won a fruit basket. We'll get that delivered to you.
All right.
And we're at the end of the program. Now what's going to happen?
Well,
Tell us what the next one's going to be.
That's right.
The good thing that happened, because this all became virtual this year, is we came up with the idea of doing these cooking demos. So this is actually going to continue. Once a month, we're going to upload cooking demos. It'll be one recipe at a time. But that'll be a new recipe every month. And so you can come back to the website, look online, and search for recipes and find new ways to cook things healthier.
That's right. Yep.
We just want to say a special thank you to everybody who made this happen today. Our AV team, it's been a huge undertaking. We just want to say thanks to George and Lyndall and Alex, Evelyn, Denitza, also to Dr. Hahn and Dr. Lindy Schwartz for the presentations earlier. And also Barb, who did our graphic design, who had to redo it a couple of times because we made it virtual. But we just want to thank you to everyone who made this possible.
And all of our cooks. They have
Yes.
been outstanding.
Amazing cooks.
Yes. Yep.
All right. And then also, isn't there something exciting happening in the winter?
This coming January, we're going to start a CHIP program. You heard both Bruce and Patsy talk about the CHIP program. So if that's something you're interested in, we're going to post that on the website. We also have Centerville CHIP.org, I believe it is. But we'll put it where the recipes are so that you can find, and we'll try to get that all updated so that you know the dates. But it will be sometime in January. So yeah, you heard the success stories, and it's a really fun program.
I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The Lord has really blessed us today. Why don't we close with a word of prayer?
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you so much for the amazing ability to have this undertaking of a show being broadcasted virtually. We thank you that despite the circumstances of that COVID has placed upon our world, we thank you that we're still able to move forward and share. And I just pray your blessing on each person that watched today. I pray that you would help us all to make healthier changes, that our bodies could be healthier, and that we could live a happier, healthier life, which is we know is what you want for each one of us. We pray a blessing on each person. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
We look forward to seeing you soon. Have a blessed day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.